Good evening. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Landman.
Here.
Councilmember DeBala.
Present.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Here.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Here.
Councilmember Honzak.
Here.
Councilmember Westland.
Here.
Great. So I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I want to just acknowledge one change to the agenda. We had originally had the update on the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force recommendations, as well as the review of Resolution 2017-45, identifying goals and priorities for the police department, scheduled for today, this evening. But in light of the need for additional time, one, for discussion, but also for preparation and notification. Those topics will be covered on May the 28th. Just want to note that members of the Public Safety Task Force that helped to develop the recommendations back in, I believe it was 2020 and 2021, have been notified of the meeting. Also, just a quick housekeeping matter, the readout from our last closed session has been updated to reflect that both the police chief and our deputy city manager, Hupti, were in participation of the closed session that occurred on, is it May the 2nd? Let me just, 7th.
7.
Yes, it should have been 2 weeks ago. Let me just triple check that date. It was 2 weeks ago, and it was on May the, I believe it was Friday, and it was May the 2nd.
Mayor, point of order, who did you say was,
From the closed session readout that is posted online, we inadvertently left off the police chief and Ms. Hupti as people who participated in the meeting.
I don't believe Chief Duvall was in that closed session. The second one.
No, we're talking about the first.
Okay, sorry. My bad.
So I just want to make sure that we are clear. Let me pull it up.
The first one was until 6:30 in April.
Yep, he was there for the first, and I just want to confirm. Yes, it was the Friday, May 2nd. Give me 1 second. Okay. Yes, so it was read out on April the 30th. The closed session was held on April the 23rd. And the notes should have been corrected to reflect that the police chief as well as Ms. Hupti were in attendance. Okay. Next we have, so those are the adjustments for tonight's meeting. For tonight's agenda, we will have 3 proclamations. The first is proclamation of May as Mental Health Awareness Month. The second is proclamation of May as Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. The third is proclamation recognizing the National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day, which is May the 15th. We will have voting sessions. The first is the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 tax rates. The second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 stormwater management budget. The second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 budget. And the resolution establishing council compensation committee, and a single reading ordinance approving a contract extension for technical support and necessary system upgrades associated with the relocation of the city TV control room. We will have 2 work sessions this evening. The first is the Police Department Annual Report, and the second is the introduction to MML Legislative Action Request process and discussion of council legislative priorities. On Wednesday, May the 21st, the council will have an administrative function session at 6:30. The council will be discussing the scope of the audit to review the sexual harassment retaliation investigation. Administrative function sessions are closed to the public. On Wednesday, May the 21st, the City Council's regular meeting will begin at 7:30. It will have a proclamation of National Public Works Week. We will have 2 presentations. The first is a final presentation on the Performance Measurement Design Project, as well as a presentation on rent stabilization by Dr. Christina Stacy of the Urban Institute. We will then have a voting session on a resolution authorizing submission of MML legislative action requests. And then we will have a work session on ordinance amending the Title VI housing regarding the issuance of rental licenses. On Monday, May the 26th is Memorial Day. City offices and facilities will be closed Sunday and Monday for the Memorial Day holiday. On Wednesday, May the 28th, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We will have 2 work sessions. The first is an update on the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force recommendations. The second is a review of the Resolution 2017-45, identifying goals and priorities for the police. And with that, we will move to the proclamation. We have a few of them today. All right. So the proclamation of May as Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas Mental Health Awareness Month was established in 1949 to increase awareness of the importance of mental health and wellness, educate the public, reduce the stigma, and promote support for those affected by mental health conditions. And whereas mental health is fundamental to everyone's overall health and well-being, greatly influencing the way we think, feel, and interact in our daily lives. And whereas nearly 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 6 youths in the United States live with a mental illness. And whereas the stigma of mental illness and misinformation can lead to devastating effects on the well-being of the individual and their community. And whereas Mental Health Awareness Month highlights the importance of access to mental health care and support services, advocating for equitable access to treatment, resources, and interventions that address the diverse needs of individuals experiencing mental health challenges. And whereas more than 30 million people in the U.S. lack access to comprehensive, high-quality care, highlighting the importance of bringing attention to this disparity. And whereas the City of Tacoma Park is committed to providing access to mental health services through its mental health outreach pilot program to address the mental health and related needs of residents in the community. And whereas the month of May is a time to promote mental health wellness, show individual respect and acceptance, and learn more about mental health. Now therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, proclaim May 2025 as Mental Health Awareness Month and call upon the Tacoma Park community to commit to raising awareness and understanding of mental health, as well as the need for comprehensive and accessible services for people with mental health conditions. Next, we have proclamation of May as Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Whereas an estimated 25.2 million people in the United States identified as Asian, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander in 2023. And whereas in 1992, Congress established May as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month to coincide with two key milestones: the arrival of the nation's first Japanese immigrants, May 7, 1843, and Chinese workers' pivotal role in building the Transcontinental Railroad, completed May 10, 1869. And whereas the name of the celebration was changed to Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in 2022. And whereas the theme this year is a legacy of leadership and resilience, recognizing the contributions of past leaders throughout history and emphasizing the strength and resilience of the community in overcoming adversity and making a positive impact on the world. And whereas members of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community call the city of Tacoma Park home. And whereas the city acknowledges the contributions that Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities have made through public service, research, science and technology, education and entrepreneurship, arts and culture, and much more. Now therefore I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, hereby proclaim May Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in Tacoma Park, and invite everyone to reflect and celebrate the rich, diverse culture and contributions of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. And the next proclamation is recognizing National Police Week, which is May the 11th through the 17th, 2025, and Peace Officers Memorial Day, May 15th, 2025. Whereas more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the serving in communities across the United States. And whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 26,998 law enforcement officers in the United States have been killed in the line of duty. And whereas Tacoma Park Police play an essential role in safeguarding the lives, property, and rights of residents of the city of Tacoma Park. And whereas it is important that residents understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agencies. And whereas officers must recognize their duty to serve by safeguarding life, property, by protecting people against violence and disorder, and defending the innocent against deception and the vulnerable against oppression. And whereas in 1962, President Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which May 15 falls as National Police Week. And whereas National Police Week commemorates law enforcement officers, past and present, who served their communities. And whereas Peace Officers Memorial Day honors those who've made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their communities or have become disabled in the performance of their duty. And whereas 148 officers died in the line of duty in 2024, and 345 new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in 2025. And whereas a candlelight vigil honoring the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be conducted on May 13th in Washington, D.C. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, proclaim May 11th through the 17th, 2025 as National Police Week and encourage Tacoma Park residents to observe May 15th, 2025 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in recognition of fallen officers and their families. All right. And so I do just want to take a moment to share a little bit about what has been done to date regarding the audit that the City Council unanimously authorized into the case of Cooper v. City of Tacoma Park. There's been 2 communications that have been disseminated this week. One from the city manager's office, which communicates that the current status of the officer in question is that he has been terminated and is no longer with the city. And the second is a blog post that I developed in consultation with the council, communicating our strategy for moving forward. One of the things that I think is really critical for all of us is that we are doing our due diligence to be as transparent as we can be, but also making sure that we are being thorough in terms of our approach. I think it's really, really important that we rely on all of you to help make us or continue to pressure us to be accountable as a council. But I'm also asking for there to be a little bit of grace, as we are, quite frankly, I've been on council for a very long time, and this is uncharted territory for us. Doesn't mean we're not going to be able to do it. It just means it's going to take a little time for us to figure out the how. But I want to, again, stress to the community that we are working diligently to not only learn more about what has transpired, but also develop an approach that will enable us to get to the bottom of what needs to improve within our city. So I do just want to take a moment, because I know that there's been questions raised and about what the council is doing. And I just want to stress to all of you that this council has been working daily to try to learn more, to try to identify ways of communication, and try to identify ways of establishing the concrete approach to the scope of the audit, how we would obtain an external firm, and the process that we would take internally to ensure that it is conducted in the utmost rigor. So I just want to take a moment to stress that to folks that are here and to folks that are not, that are watching. Cannot stress enough how seriously this council is taking this matter. And so with that, I am going to move to public comments on voting items. And just as a reminder, voting items this evening include second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 tax rates, second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 stormwater management budget, second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 budget, resolution establishing the council compensation committee, and a single reading ordinance approving the contract extension for technical support and necessary system upgrades associated with the relocation of the city TV control room. Do we have any public comments on voting items this evening? Public comments on voting items. Okay. Do we have any virtual public comments on voting items? Okay. And now we will move to general public comments. Do we have any general public comments?
Mayor, council members, and neighbors, my name's Terry Siemens. I live in Ward 4. Like many of you, I've been following the news about the recent legal settlement involving our police department. I'm relieved that more information is starting to come out, but I'm disappointed that it took a formal request under state law to make that happen. The best way for any government, especially one that values the trust of its people, is to respond to serious incidents with swift, full transparency. That's how we learn from our mistakes, that's how we hold people accountable, and that's how we rebuild trust. Cities and companies with far greater resources than ours have learned this lesson. We should too. Most people raising questions about the settlement aren't looking to stir up trouble. They simply want to understand what happened and how it's being addressed. But let's be honest, some voices you hear now are the same voices who always speak out against the police, no matter what the issue. Others take every opportunity to criticize the city. Transparency benefits everyone, but especially those with a genuine desire to build a safer and more just community. Many of you know why my long-standing commitment to aligning our police practices with the progressive values of this city. That work hasn't been easy, but it has moved forward. And tonight, during National Police Week, I want to thank the many dedicated officers and support staff who have worked hard not only to protect us, but to transform the way they serve. The shift from a warrior mentality to a community guardian approach truly began when Tony Duvall became police chief. Under his leadership, we've seen real changes in personnel, in procedures, and in priorities. Officers who didn't align with this new vision have moved on. New officers are being brought in who see their role as helpers and protectors, not enforcers. The department now more closely reflects the diversity of our community. Training in de-escalation and new policies support this guardian mindset. And the department is going even further, bringing the mental health professionals and housing specialists to address the root causes of public safety concerns. There is still work to do, but I invite you, residents and council members alike, to dig deeper into what's really happening in our police department. I challenge you to find another city making more thoughtful, determined progress toward a culture of policing that fits the values of a city like Tacoma Park. Let's hold people accountable, let's stay informed, but let's also give credit where it's due. Thank you to the excellent, dedicated women and men in our police department. And thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
I'm Tom Gagliardo. I live in the city of Tacoma Park. All of
Let me
you-
make sure you get your 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate your
No worries.
acknowledging that.
Tom
This
gets
is
5.
long. I have reviewed 103 pages of documents. I'm going to be as succinct as I can. If I'm running out of time, please warn me, because there are comments at the end that I want to make sure you hear. This week, I received a response to the Public Information Act request, and here's some of the things that were revealed. One, in August of 2022, the police department received a complaint of sexual harassment from dispatcher Kekela Cooper. The harassment occurred over an 18-day period. Two, to his credit, Jerry, to his credit, Chief Duvall immediately authorized an investigation. 3, Mr. Black was charged with 7 offenses: discrimination, harassment, retaliation, conduct unbecoming, conduct of employees, parentheses, city code, neglect of duty, unsatisfactory performance, duty to respond, dereliction of duties, and violation of standards of conduct. 4, Tacoma Park issued Black a notice of termination of his employment on November 10, 2022. At about the same time, Chief Duvall offered Mr. Black a compromise. Here's what he said, here's what he wrote. However, the following amended disciplinary action is being offered in lieu of termination if you agree to accept the findings of all 7 administrative allegations. Waive your right to a hearing board, agree to the following discipline in lieu of discharge. 1, demotion of rank to private, attend mandatory sexual harassment training, and several other items. Next, Mr. Black remained a police officer for 2 years after reaching the agreement with the chief. I don't understand that. He left employment only a week ago on May 7th. We hear tonight that he was terminated. When interviewed, Ms. Cooper and others had been served with a, quote, confidential do not discuss order. We do not know if these orders were meant to prevent Ms. Cooper and others from communicating with the city's human resource staff, the city manager, their union, the mayor and council members, and the public. Fortunately, on May 15, 2023, Chief Duvall informed Brendan Smith, president of ASME 3399, that the orders would be rescinded. Mr. Smith deserves credit for zealously defending Ms. Cooper and the other employees he represents. In the interest of time, I will not go through all of the lurid comments that are attributed to Mr. Black, but I will point out 2. 1, he told Ms. Cooper that he liked big women, and his wife and he had an open relationship, made a gay slur towards his own son, and showed pictures of his wife in lingerie, and showed other implicit uh, photographs and videos of other women. That should be explicit, quite frankly. I think you figured that out. Several officers' employees were interviewed and verified that Dispatcher Cooper expressed that she felt uncomfortable around then Sergeant Black due to him having inappropriate sexual conversations with her and making sexual advances. We know that a complaint was filed with the Montgomery County Human Rights Office and a lawsuit with the Circuit Court for Montgomery County, and that the suit was settled for $1 million, according to a document signed by the city manager on March 26, 2025. Here's the important part. Questions remain. Why was Mr. Black offered a demotion rather than being fired? Given the dates on several documents, it's unclear whether he was placed on paid leave for 6 months, but it appears that he was. Was he suspended for any period of time without pay? Was he trusted during the more than 2 years he remained employed as a sworn officer to appropriately deal with women reporting, for example, domestic violence or sexual assault? How did he interact with women in the community and the women officers with whom he served? Did he quit voluntarily on May 7, or was he terminated? Did he resign in lieu of termination? But here's the most important question. Was he paid any severance pay? If prospective employers inquire about his employment, how will the city respond? Who authorized the settlement of the lawsuit for $1 million? I pointed out last week that no substantive motions had been filed and discovery had not been completed. And the documents received this week indicate the police department did not find evidence of retaliation. Given this, settling for this amount of money is, to say the least, unusual. As I told you, I've been a plaintiff's employment lawyer for decades. Unless there is something vague that someone wants to keep secret, this doesn't make sense. Calling for an independent audit is the right thing to do. I trust the investigator who is retained by the city will fearlessly investigate, ferret out facts, and go where evidence leads. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is Jack Gillum. I'm a resident of Ward 1. I'm also a father of 2 children in the Montgomery County school system, 2 of whom will be attending Piney Branch Elementary School. You see where this is going. I understand that this body, and appreciate, and a lot of our neighbors do, that you do not have the legal authority over the school system or the county public park system, but you have a very vested interest in what happens next door. We were informed 2 weeks ago that among the construction possibilities of that site will largely make it rendered unusable for a period of at least 2 to 2.5 years, and will require busing our students across the county for, by my calculations, using the middle of rush hour, up to an hour in the morning and just as long on the way back. That is simply unacceptable. And what makes this more unacceptable and frankly angering, and you should know that dozens of your constituents in that last 2 period are in fact very angry about this, is the fact that there is no discussion apparently with the county parks department to at least pursue or investigate using the land next door of the park to either put temporary buildings so children can have school next there, build a new school, and then swap the land later. This is simply an option where we understand that this is a preliminary investigation by the district. This is early planning, but this is the time now to get involved. And we really would hope that whatever plans happen next door, they are ones that do not involve sending our kids across the county. We move here so we can have walkable schools. We moved here so we could have extracurricular activities where parents can go meet with teachers and meet with others regularly. It is hard to do that, especially for people in this community who don't have easy access to a car to be on hours of bus rides just to go see their teacher. This is an opportunity for us, especially considering the fact that I believe Councilmember Landman had pointed out a couple weeks ago that this body gave the land to that school to be a community, to serve a community function. Not just a school, but the pool that everyone knows about and loves to use and has used it for decades, that will be gone and out of service too. I hope that as we go forward that this council, the mayor, Mr. City Manager, and others will work with us to move forward to find a reasonable solution for our children that does not involve putting them on a bus and sending them across the county up to 9 hours a week. As these plans go forward, we hope you are involved with us. We hope you come to these meetings, and we hope you continue this discussion so we can have something that works for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments?
So my name is Jacqueline Moore, and I live in Ward 2. I applaud the city for taking steps necessary to launch an independent audit of the Kekila Cooper sexual harassment case and the subsequent $1 million settlement between the city and Ms. Cooper. I'm wearing yellow tonight to remind the mayor, council, and staff that sunlight is a necessary and vital component to all parts of the audit process. It's my understanding that Mrs. Mara Habti will be the point of contact between the entity contracted to conduct the audit and the city. And I have to say, I mean, I wish there didn't have to be a city point person. I wish that the auditor could just get the documents from the staff and council as they need them and cut out a city person. I just think it's a lot of pressure for her. And anyway, so I've read the city lawyer's response to the MPIA submitted by another resident. Mr. Cornbrooks does a dance of semantics to justify why he wasn't able to turn over everything that was requested. Reality check. The requested documents are stored as digital files. Redact, drag, drop or attach, and send. Click. There's no need to pay for hours of staff time to produce the requested documents. One more thing. My legions of former 4th grade students learned very quickly in my class that it was important to own their mistakes and to celebrate their successes. If 9-year-olds can grasp this concept, so can adults. So fingers crossed that all involved in the Cooper case will be able to own their mistakes and celebrate their successes. I'm really pleased that Thomas Black is no longer employed by the city. No one should have to put up with the way he treated Miss Cooper. I was encouraged recently by a group of young women from California. It's a band called the Linda Lindas. Their song Racist Sexist Boy, written 2 years ago when the band members ranged in age from only 12 years old to 19, makes it clear that these days more and more people are not putting up with sexual harassment of any type, ever. You can check out their video for the song online. It was filmed at a branch of the LA Public Library, or do what I did and go see them live the next time they come through the DMV. These ladies are not taking any crap from anyone, and they only use 2 minutes and 7 seconds to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments this evening? General public comments?
Thank you. Hi, Elizabeth Wallace, Ward 1. Thank you for your efforts so far this month, starting the process for an objective audit. And thank you again to Ms. Cooper. However, going forward, the police department must commit to a higher standard of conduct to which they will be accountable. Let's start by getting accredited. By CALEA, the Commission for Accreditation by Law Enforcement Agencies. There are 80 agencies in Maryland, including 47 police departments. Though Maryland doesn't mandate that all police departments be accredited, those that do so voluntarily pursue it as a way to demonstrate their commitment to professional excellence and best practices. I seem to remember it's been discussed in the past here and dismissed by previous Tacoma Park chiefs. I don't know the position of the current chief or staff. I called CALEA, and unfortunately they had no record of any past accreditation for Tacoma Park. The city police departments that are accredited include Aberdeen, Annapolis, Bowie, Cumberland, Frederick, Gaithersburg, Hagerstown, Hyattsville, La Plata, Salisbury, the counties of Montgomery, Howard, Baltimore, University of Maryland, Kent, Anne Arundel, and more. Greenville, where a former acting Tacoma Park police chief is now the chief since 2018, when Duvall came on board. He has maintained the accreditation that began in 2006. Upon completion of their original assessment, Greenbelt was found to be in compliance with the 446 standards of professional excellence set forth by CALEA. And Rockville is accredited, and that's where a former Tacoma Park deputy chief who had an impressive amount of experience in internal affairs investigations works. Unfortunately, he left here in 2022. But what would this add to the budget? $11,450. We can pay in installments. We have to handle travel expenses of the assessors. The agreement would be for 36 months. Most agencies can complete the assessment in a shorter period of time. If you don't finish, an extension can be granted for a fee of 35% of the initial fee. Maybe an incentive would be to take that penalty out of the paychecks of the senior police staff, the city manager, and the mayor, kind of like a traffic ticket you shared if riding in the same car. Annual fees are $4,000. Accreditations are renewed every 3 years. Maybe even some of the suggestions the task force had to reimagine public safety are already part of the CALIA assessments. There's even a public portal there where the community can post commendations or concerns about the police department's compliance. With this tool, the community would help keep the police department accountable without reporting to the police department directly. Any official complaints would still go through the normal police channels. Did we spin our wheels with the task force? How much did it cost? Should we have just started the certification process in 2021? Our police department has been under scrutiny, would have been under scrutiny for the past 3 years. Maybe we could have nipped this
Thank
in the
you.
bud.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Start my clock.
Right.
David Bates, Philadelphia Avenue. I want you all to know that I served as chair of the city's first Citizens Public Safety Advisory Committee back in '93 and '94. I participated in the Citizens Police Academy when it was offered. I learned something about our police force. I have tremendous respect for them. However, I find it highly ironic that we are in National Police Week. You just did a proclamation, and we are talking about police misconduct in our department. I was extremely disappointed and surprised when I learned about the issue in the paper, the Washington Post. And I'm hearing now, based on what I think the mayor said, you all are still trying to learn what happened. And I've been hearing from other channels too that you were not all informed in a necessarily timely process. Maybe that's wrong, but we haven't heard much from the city. It seems that somewhere along the line, while things were trying to be taken care of, there were failures in the city process, city communications, maybe in the city action or lack thereof. I would urge that while you are reviewing all of what went on, and I'm kind of sad to think we're spending more money in addition to $1 million, we're spending more money on an outsider to come in and try and figure out what happened. I would urge that you consider some other issues. Mr. Gagliardo made some extremely good points, and he raised some of the most important issues. I would like to add, I think that of the other issues you should be considering, vetting process. How was this individual brought into our department? What was the vetting process? Secondly, what happened after the complaints were made, and why, again, was he held on for so long? Why did it take 2.5 years to bring this to a conclusion? I would urge, if possible, for additional transparency, that citizens in the community be permitted to participate in this review so that we can ensure there's nothing being whitewashed, so that we can ensure that whoever is being hired to do this review is not viewing the city as a client that must be protected. I would urge that there be some form of citizen participation, just as we had with the previous Public Safety Citizens Advisory Committee. I think that would help go a long way towards restoring some faith in the city, in the processes, in people's notion that when there is a complaint, it'll be taken care of. And I'm not really so concerned about this payout, this money. I'm really concerned that we had an employee of our city who had to put up with that for weeks, months. I don't know how long, but it sounded from the newspaper like it went on for a long time. That should not happen. And it shouldn't happen to any resident either. So again, I would just urge, get the city residents involved in helping with this review. It doesn't have to be everybody, but see if you can find a way. It will help with transparency, and I think it would help restore some trust and faith in the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any other general public comments this evening?
Hi, I'm Richard Sember from Ward 1. Cindy and my daughter went to school together. So I want to comment on the harassment and the retaliation settlement. I didn't write this little part down, but obviously there are people in the city who have pretty deep knowledge of the case, the department, the history. I don't have that. I'm sort of a, just a member of the community who's not that far into it. But the city council has asked for patience on the part of the public, and we see why, right? It's complicated. I'd like to suggest that there's a way you can elicit some of that patience. I sent you all an email, if you've caught up with your email, and I know you get a lot, you've seen this, maybe you haven't had a chance. But I think there's some questions that if you can answer them, it would go a long way towards developing that patience. And I'm not a lawyer, but I think that these are probably things you can talk about without prejudicing the investigation, the audit. And so my questions, from the shallow knowledge point of view, are how much of the $1 million did the city itself pay? What was the so-called deductible? Another question is, what was or what will be the quantitative impact on the city's liability insurance rate? And I don't mean the total bill, because the city's insurance covers many, many, many things, but I mean the line item in the bill that relates to the liability insurance that covers this. And one good way to answer that might be to show a little chart or a little table of the costs for the last few years, and then the year impacted by the settlement, because I expect there's probably a little bit of increase every year. Two different speakers, and again tonight, have stated that the case was settled before discovery. I mean, I'm inclined to believe them. I don't see why I shouldn't, but it would be interesting to have the council confirm that. And so that's it. There are 3 questions. How much did the city pay? What's the impact? And, when was it settled relative to discovery? And these are not necessarily the most important questions. They're certainly not. But if you can answer them, it may help elicit some of that sense of the trust that you've been asking for. So that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any other general public comments?
Hi, I'm Jenny Myers from Ward 2, and I'm here also to talk about the sexual harassment case in the police department on a day when I thought some of our officers were going to be here, but I hope the chief is listening. I feel like some folks may feel like this is last week's business, but now that we have an investigation that's queued up, and I'm happy about that. But I'm here to say, don't put this aside. Just because we've got this investigation lined up, don't put this aside. While we celebrate the accomplishments of the police department in the annual report, do not forget this mark on the department. Because while Thomas Black is no longer employed by the city, the culture that allowed him to behave so abominably may very well be intact. That's my primary concern. Thomas Black could only have gotten away with his inexcusable behavior, abusing his power as a police sergeant to harass a woman of lesser rank, a civilian, in a way no person should tolerate, subjecting her to sexual harassment and haranguing her while she was trying to do her job, keeping Tacoma Park residents safe. He only got away with it because the people in his workplace, some of the people in his workplace, allowed it to happen. Why did no one call him out on his behavior? I want to be able to trust the Tacoma Park Police. I'm sure officers want residents like me to trust them, so they can do their job in the way that they feel they should. And I want all officers and civilians in the department to feel they can trust each other and know that their colleagues will act with integrity and respect for residents and for each other. No one wants to report to a toxic workplace. So as you consider the Tacoma Park Police Department annual report, we must keep this top of mind. Changing a workplace culture that allows and even laughs along with sexual harassment must be a priority. I am so sick of people saying it's no big deal, don't worry about it, just get along. Nobody's saying that tonight, I realize, but I've heard it my whole life. We have to change this. We can't accept that. Please, for the sake of our police department officers and staff and for the safety of our residents and our city address this problem thoroughly and effectively so we never have to tolerate another Thomas Black. Don't forget. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments? Okay. Do we have any virtual public comments?
Yes, we should have Mary Machui.
Mary Jane, are you with us?
Who are you calling?
Ms. Machui? We can hear you. Are you there?
No, this is Catherine. Can you hear me?
Okay. Oh, so it's Catherine Tunis, not Mary Jane Machui. Oh, there's both of them. So who's first?
Mary.
Okay, Mary Jane Machui, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Okay. I just wanted to thank Ms. DeBala. She said you'd help me with my tax credits, which are really complicated this year. And I'll warn people, if you're a senior and you have an IRA, be careful what you take out because it counts as income. And because of the $30,000 I took out to buy our only car, a 6-year-old hybrid small car, put me in a higher tax bracket, and I will not get any property tax credits this year as a result. And we cannot afford it. It's going to be almost $7,000, and I don't see how I can afford it. And that needs to be changed. I mean, it was our only car, for God's sakes. It was a 6-year-old car, and they need to change the rules. They're too rigid. And I just want to say, in our neighborhood, I'm sad to say that it's becoming more and more wealthy, and houses selling for $1 million. And it just, it's hard to feel like we belong that much. And especially when you're a low-income person with disabilities that affect your brains, you usually feel lonesome and lots of times don't feel like you belong. But when everybody around you is talking about their latest trip to Europe and are driving a Lexus, I mean, come on, I'm sorry. It just makes me feel even more distant. And it's just, please. And people, when you sell your house, please don't try to sell it for $1 million. Please think of other people that are lower income that might be able to afford a lower income house. And there's a lot of people who would like to live in Tacoma Park. We've got a great reputation. But please consider when you sell your house, whoever's listening, don't sell it for over $1 million. Please, please, please. Don't sell it to a developer who's going to knock it down and turn it into a 5-bedroom, 4-bath, $1,700,000 house. Please, please, please. I mean, we were lucky, my ex-husband and I were lucky to get our house for a little under $70,000 in 1985. But even then we had a hard time getting a loan. So please, please, there's some of us who would really like to live in Tacoma Park but can't afford. And I want to thank you for the village rides who have helped me taking me rides to my trying to get positive here. And I want to thank you to Officer Addison on March 27th of this year. I felt bad, and I ended up on the 3rd floor when I tried to get my passport renewed, and he came and drove me home. He was a very nice gentleman. So I wanted to say something good about the police department. But and thank you very much again for Village Rides and for Sandy Egan for our organizing them. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And I believe Catherine Tunis.
Yes, hi, this is Catherine. Thank you so much. I wanted to say thanks to the council for spending time listening to all the residents about the upcoming audit and taking the time to try to get the audit done fairly and correctly. I certainly appreciate the council's effort in this. I have to say that yesterday was a really difficult day for me, and it wasn't just the rain, because I was spending the whole day reviewing the documents that Tom
got through his public information request. And I appreciate the summary that he gave you. I thought he did a pretty good summary. There were a few details that I noticed that I thought were worthy of a very close look that an audit might miss, and I wanted to make sure that they were included. The first thing is there were a couple of documents that came up in the context of retaliation, possible retaliation, and one was a document that was labeled an investigation report that was found on a shared drive H that should not have been there, and once it was reported to the command staff, it was removed. There was also a report of a performance evaluation that, according to Ms. Cooper's managers, did not happen. So I think this is something that is really worth looking into, because both of these documents would be evidence, and an audit should be looking at the metadata for these documents to find out who created them and where and when they were posted. That would be, I think, an important piece of information. The documents also showed that there was a fair amount of fear of retaliation in both male and female employees. Some people felt free to talk to the investigators, and others, you could tell that they were just clamming up because they were terrified. And some even said that they were scared, afraid of retaliation. I noted that some male officers showed a significant amount of support for Officer Black and maintained close contact with him, even visiting him physically at his home and speaking to him multiple times on the phone while he was suspended for his behavior. His behavior was reprehensible, and it should be noted that Black himself admitted to most of that behavior. Empathy is a really good thing and is normal for employees to have with their coworkers, and to often form a close bond with their supervisors. But sometimes trust can be misplaced. And I will speak from my own experience. Someone that you think you can trust for years, you've worked with them for years, and then all of a sudden you realize that they have done some pretty reprehensible things. And we can be blind to that individual's faults. And I hope that as these officers become aware of Black's behavior, that they don't ever seek to emulate that behavior. I hope that they are able to see that his behavior was incorrect and to manage their own behavior much better.
Thank you very much.
As a reminder,
Ms.
I'm sorry?
Tunis, your time is up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other virtual public comments?
Okay, we're going to move on to council comments. Do we have council comments this evening? Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quick, reminder, June 19th is a federal holiday in honor of Juneteenth, in commemoration of the freeing of some 250,000 enslaved people on June 19th in 1865. And in preparation for the celebration, our Juneteenth committee has been working really hard to get all the details and get things lined up for a celebration that's going to take place on June 19th at Piney Branch, 7611 Piney Branch Road at the Tacoma Park Middle School at the Lee Jordan Field. So just everybody mark that on your calendars and come on out. There's plans for entertainment. There'll be a live band, plenty of vendors, and so everybody planning to come on out. More details will be coming. I think it starts at noon and it's over around 6 o'clock. So just wanted to mention that real quick. That's it.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Gilbert, do you have any other council comments? Councilmember Westlake.
Okay. Hi, I wanted to thank everyone for their comments tonight and the messages that have come in. Echoing what the mayor said earlier, we really are all taking this very seriously and devoting a lot of time to it, and want to do as good a job as we can. On that note, I just want to point out that the documents, you know, they share a lot of information that is public, and a lot of names are in that. And I just want us to caution if we're sharing information about people that had nothing to do with it. For example, I personally was kind of troubled to read about, it's one thing to discuss how he made the derogatory terms about his son. It's another that talking about his son, and there's comments about his own mental health and his sexual orientation. So I just hope that we in the spirit of, in our attempts to try to be transparent, we don't disrespect people's privacy that had nothing to do with the matter, if that makes sense. And I just wanted to share about Piney Branch. Frankly, personally, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that. And I will be, am and will be very invested. My daughter is right now in kindergarten at TPMS, so we would definitely be affected. And frankly, all the folks in Ward 6, none of them are walkers. They are all very bus dependent. We are literally at the tip of the county. So I will be very focused on how far our kids might have to travel, knowing in particular that the Ward 6 kids would be most likely going the longest. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Westwood. Do you have any other council comments this evening? Councilmember Landman.
Let me echo the comments from Councilmember Westwood about the importance that all of us on the council are, the importance that we attach to doing a proper job of reviewing what transpired with respect to the sexual harassment and retaliation case. The council is itself determining the scope of work of the audit. We are determined to maintain the independence and rigor of that audit, and I continue to welcome suggestions from anyone in my ward over the next few days as we finalize that document. And I very much appreciate the seriousness with which people who made comments tonight also take this issue. Now let me just turn for a moment to a couple of local things. First, Hodges Heights, thank you to the Department of Public Works and the contractors for the significant progress that has been made in sidewalks being put in there in the last week. With the rain, I'm sure things got delayed a little, the last month I should say, and we look forward to the continuing progress over the coming weeks. It's a mess while it's going on, but it's well worth the effort, so thank you to the city and our workers for that. I also want to say to the people of Hodges Heights many of whom experienced significant problems with the power surge and power outage back in April, that I appreciate. Over 50 different reports of damage claims have been shared with me, and they're in a Google document that we're sharing with the city, and that we are working closely with the city manager and the deputy city manager and others to try and make sure that as we in the city community center deal with the problems here, that we also try and figure out how we can work together with the residents who experience those problems to address them collectively and make sure that it doesn't happen again, and if at all possible, figure out how, if at all, Pepco can be held accountable for the damages that ensued. So this is early days in the process, and I appreciate the efforts from the city already and the residents of the neighborhood to try and work collectively on that issue. Let's stay in touch on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, thank you all for coming out and sharing your thoughts. And I appreciate all the specific questions, and I appreciate the comments that my two colleagues have made. And I want to reiterate what one of the commenters said, that as we look for accountability and hold our police, our public safety works to the highest standard, we also celebrate how far we have come in the last 7-ish years. That's something to note. And I wanted to, because we could all use a break, I wanted to point out that in Forest Park this weekend, this Saturday, from 2 to 6, there will be music to celebrate federal workers. Federal workers and residents all over the city are invited to come and just relax and take a break from some of the stresses that we've all been under. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you, Mayor Searcy. First, very briefly on the PBES rehab or renovation project. I appreciate Mr. Gillum's comment and wanted to point out, in particular, I think the afternoon ride, if it's the Grosvenor location, would be a concern on that bus. And I also appreciated his notion of using modular buildings with, getting to the main idea of keeping the campus somewhere in the neighborhood, keeping all the operations somewhere in the neighborhood, if we can do that. And as a reminder, the second community meeting about PBS will be in the auditorium next door tomorrow at 7 to 8 p.m. I appreciated all of the comments about the audit. And I wanted to mention Ms. Wallace's idea about CALEA accreditation is very intriguing to me, and I think that if the chief feels that we are meeting the standards, it would be great to see the data that shows we're already meeting or exceeding those standards. Thank you, Mr. Gagliardo, for the PIA request and the report outs. Ginny Myers, thank you for your bringing up the question of organizational culture. And I think we all agree it's very important to evaluate the distinction between an isolated incident and any pattern of sexism, harassment, retaliation, or other sorts of unacceptable conduct. I'm noting that, to my colleagues, I'm noting that the update on reimagining public safety task force happens to right now be set for the same day as the review of the resolution 2017-45. And I'm wondering whether it might be wise to have time to digest the review of the task force recommendations, but also perhaps consider waiting on revising the goals and priorities for the police department until we have an audit outcome. It's just something that I would hope our team would consider. Also, one resident raised the point that technically in our first vote to approve the audit, we said that the city attorney would be the lead. So technically, if that's not happening, I suppose, I don't know whether, as a point of order, we need to do a second vote on that. There's a WACO virtual meeting on the evening of May 22nd. I think that Catherine Tunis might have been about to remind everybody to donate blood on Saturday, May 24th, I think, 11:30 to 4:30, right in this building. Same day as the event Cindy mentioned at Forest Park, we have the Hootenanny fundraiser at VFW Post 350 from 2 to 10 p.m., which will be supporting kids, backpacks and things. Crossroads Community Food Fair is on this Sunday at Laurel Avenue in Old Town from 10 to 2. And last thing, if Councilmember Honzak were here, I think she would be reminding you of the Flower Avenue Together celebration in the Long Branch area, really festive event, which is going to be on Saturday, May 31st from 2 to 5 p.m. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel, and I do just want to acknowledge a couple of points. First, because the council will be developing the scope of the audit as well as the process in which the audit will take place, once the council has reached consensus and has agreed on that approach, that later vote will supersede the original motion to have the city council, to have the city manager start to act on, right? So we gave, our motion was to provide the city manager with the authority to move forward with the audit. The city manager made the suggestion of working with the city attorney. But again, when we finalize the scope, the process will be based on what the council chooses. So I just want to make sure that that point is very clear. So I want to, thank Councilmember Honzak for hanging in there. She is really sick, which is why you may not hear her until it's time to vote. So Councilmember Honzak is here, but she's very ill. Couple things. I want to thank everyone for coming out. I don't want to belabor the point, but I do take the comments and the feedback that we've received today very seriously, and appreciate all of the feedback that we've received. For those that have commented on Piney Branch Elementary Feasibility Study, I do just want to, and we are working with MCPS to make sure that there is some clarity that is provided. I think it's really important for people to understand generally what goes into a land swap and why it is not as easy as one may think. And two, what the process would be for this to ultimately move to construction, which can take many years. When I was testifying earlier this year for the feasibility study to begin, because it had been in the CIP for MCPS for years, I was sitting next to, testifying alongside someone from another school who had had their feasibility study done years ago and were still waiting on funds to be made available so that they could move into the design and construction phase. So I understand that one of the major concerns for people is the commute, but I want to just really let people know that in real life, these things happen quite slowly. And it is a real possibility that your children will be in middle school before we actually get the money.
Madam Mayor, could you, when you said in the CIP, I think that might need an explanation.
Yes, sure,
for
sure.
public.
The Capital Improvement Program, which is for the school district. It's where they list every single construction project that they are hoping to fund, where they are in the process, how long they've been there, and where they are. So the goal is always to try to get your construction project in the capital improvement program and funding tied. And there may be a mention of your school, but that mention could be for years before there's actual funding that may be made available to actually start construction. So while, yes, I understand commutes are important, and I recognize that there's concern and fear about commute, I think what is really important for us to focus on as a community is what are the amenities, what are the things that we want to see in the school so that the design can be reflective of our wishes, keeping in mind that it can be a number of years before construction ever takes place. And I just want to level set, because I don't want folks to be up in arms right now thinking that next year their children will be on a bus to Bethesda, when the reality is we may not, depending on how the budget looks, we may not get, we're probably not first in line for construction monies, and it may be a number of years before that actually is worked into a budget where we can actually start construction. So I just want to level set, and we are working with MCPS to make sure that there's some clarity that's provided in terms of timing, but also in terms of the overall process. The couple quick things. I had a wonderful Sunday. I was able to spend Mother's Day with Cheer, and they, the wonderful women from Ethiopia that participated in their wellness and digital literacy program. It was their graduation, and that was on Sunday. Also, there's a ton of things that are happening this week. Just as a reminder for my colleagues, tomorrow is the Montgomery County MML chapter meeting. It's starting at 6:30. Just as a reminder, the nominations for the board, we will be voting on that tomorrow. The Piney Branch feasibility study is, the next meeting is at 7 p.m. tomorrow. And I am also going to be speaking at the Lunch and Learn fundraiser, which is also tomorrow, 6 o'clock. So I'll be moving around a lot tomorrow. On Saturday, there's a lot of things that are happening, some that you've already heard about. The Tacoma Langley community-led Purple Line walk. The community-led walk is this Saturday. It'll begin at 9:30, end at about noon, and the goal is for the Purple Line Coalition, as well as the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority and the Langley Park Civic Association to walk through areas that are impacted by the Purple Line so that we can advocate for pedestrian safety improvements that are needed. I'm also going to be at the Forest Park Music Fest. I'll be there between 2 and 3. And on Sunday, it was already mentioned, the annual Crossroads Community Food Fair. I'll be there. And also the Village of Tacoma Park's potluck is on Sunday, and I will be there from 4 to 6. So just want to encourage everyone to get out and participate in some of the fabulous events that are happening throughout the city. And with that, I will turn things over to City Manager DeSpirito for City Manager comments.
Madam Mayor, a quick clarification.
Sure.
The walkthrough on the Purple Line, you said it started at 9:30. Where does it start in case people wanted to join you?
The Purple Line? It will be starting in the parking lot where the Bank of America is, which I believe is on the Prince George's side. And they're asking folks to arrive at 9:25. All of this is going to be a walk around the 4 quadrants of New Hampshire and University where the Tacoma Langley Purple Line stop will be.
Excuse me, did you say Sunday or Saturday?
That's Saturday. All right. Okay. City Manager DeSpirito, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and council and guests. From the Housing and Community Development Department, Montgomery County Public Schools is continuing its outreach around the future of the Piney Branch Elementary School, which we've just been discussing. Again, just as a reminder, the next meeting is planned for tomorrow, May 15th, from 7 to 8 p.m. at the Piney Branch Elementary School cafeteria. The Housing and Community Development Department is offering a free bike repair pop-up at the Tacoma Park Farmers Market and Crossroads Farmers Market during the month of May. You're welcome to swing by and get your bicycle in top shape ahead of Bike to Work Day, which is tomorrow, May 15th. From the Police Department, Tacoma Park Police and Inova Blood Donor Services are hosting a community blood drive on Saturday, May 24th from 11:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. in the Azalea Room, 2nd floor, here at 7500 Maple Avenue. Donating takes just a little time, but can save lives. Please register via the email link provided by the Police Department or contact Catherine Tunis at tacomaparkbloodDrive@gmail.com for more information and a link to register. And a special thank you to Catherine for her advocacy of this. May is Seatbelt Safety Month. Click it or ticket. The statewide Chiefs Challenge kicked off on May 1st and runs through the entire month. Tacoma Park officers are participating in the National Click It or Ticket campaign, focusing on seatbelt enforcement and public education. Fewer tickets means more people are buckling up, and that's the goal. Seatbelts save lives. Please remember to buckle up and keep children, especially children, properly restrained. It's the law. I'd like to thank Councilmember Schlegel for mentioning the Flower Avenue event. This is on Saturday, May 31st, from 2 to 5 p.m. The location is at the intersection in Street Erie and Flower in Erie. And special thanks also to Councilmember Honzak for all of her hard work last year when the first event was held, and this year, as well as the volunteers that are all participating in helping to make this event happen. The public is welcome. There's a lot of fun things to do, a lot of great food to eat, help support the businesses at that location, and just help celebrate the neighborhoods. And from the City Manager's Office, this week we do celebrate National Police Week, National Peace Officers Memorial Day on May 15th, tomorrow. This week we will be joining thousands of others in recognizing the brave men and women who serve in the law enforcement profession and risk their lives every day to serve and protect our communities. Most importantly, we will honor those who so valiantly sacrifice their own lives to ensure the safety of others. So on this National Police Week, I would like to add a personal and professional observation. The approximately 65 employees of our Tacoma Park Police Department, which is up to 43 of whom are sworn officers, are among the finest public safety professionals with whom I have worked in 30 years. They are talented, well-trained and educated, community-oriented, brave, and committed to serving the residents of Tacoma Park. They chose to work in this community rather than any other. They do a thankless job in a full-service department that most of us could never do, putting themselves in constant danger at all times of the day or night and weekends, and in any and all weather conditions. We also have one of the most diverse departments in the region by race and gender. As individual professionals and as an effective team, I would rate them favorably in comparison with any other police agencies. This past year, in my weekly city manager's report, I have frequently and proudly recognized individual police employee accomplishments. I routinely share with the mayor and council the many letters and emails that I receive, or the chief receives, from residents who are complimenting these men and women for specific acts of service and caring above and beyond what those residents would have normally expected. We as a community, in my view, are extremely fortunate to have a full-service police department and the quality of officers and employees that we have. Many other communities are not so fortunate. So again, this being National Police Week, it is more than appropriate, in my opinion, to recognize the quality of people that comprise this department and the amazing work that they do 365 days a year. We salute you, and we are proud of your critical mission in Tacoma Park.
Thank you very much. And so before we move into the voting session, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we will reconvene. So we will reconvene. Let's just make it an even 9 minutes. At 9 o'clock, we will reconvene. All right, 9 o'clock. All right, thank you so much. almost over, but I think our mics are working. All right. Okay. So we're going to move into our voting session. I just want to do a quick mic check for Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Honzak, can you hear us? She's still on. Okay, okay. Excellent. All right, so we're going to move into our voting session. The first item is the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 tax rates. They're just confirming that there are no modifications since our vote last week. All right, excellent. Would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Seeing no additional points of discussion, Councilmember Schlegel.
Yes, just a quick point. Stella Onyevu, who lives on Sligo Mill Road in Ward 3, asked that I would say to the council, please lower taxes. They are driving me out as a 30-year resident.
Thank you very much. Any other points of discussion? Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Landman,
Nay.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
No.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Honzak,
Councilmember Honzak?
Aye.
Okay, great.
Councilmember Wesley.
Aye.
Okay, now we're going to vote to convene as the Stormwater Management Board. Would someone like to move that we convene?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. All those in favor of convening as the Stormwater Management Board, please say aye. Aye. Do you have any opposed? Any abstain? All right, we are now the Stormwater Management Board. We are moving into the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 Stormwater Management Budget. Just want to do a quick check with city management to see whether there were any modifications. Okay, seeing none, would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Any points of discussion? Okay, seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Yes.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Honzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Wesley.
Aye.
Oh my gosh, we gotta get Councilmember Honzak in bed with tea. Okay, the next item is,
Excuse me, Mayor, point of order. I just want to share with you, if you can hear me,
yes,
that the mic is cutting out very frequently, which is why you're not hearing me answer. I'm having to read lips.
okay. All right, is this better now?
Oh, it's frequently when Irma does her call, I can't hear her at all.
Okay, so I will make sure that I
think
repeat.
it was happening throughout prior parts of the meeting too, but not nearly as frequently as when y'all are going back and forth. Just if you want to call me first, it might make it easier. I don't know if you can do it out of order.
What I can do, Councilmember Honzak, is I will make sure to repeat your name. It sounds like my mic is louder. Okay, so we're gonna move to the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 budget. Any points of discussion for that from the city management team? Seeing none. Would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Any points of discussion? Okay. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
No.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Honzak,
Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Honzak.
I can't tell if everyone's looking at me, but I hear nothing. If you
Okay.
hear me, I'm voting aye on the budget.
Okay.
I apologize. I can't hear a word.
Okay. Yes, you're voting. We have you logged as aye on the budget.
Councilmember Wesley.
Aye.
Okay.
Point of order.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I thought that was the vote on the stormwater budget. That was my mistake. I intended to vote no on the city budget. Okay, thank you. Correct my vote.
Okay. I just want to confirm with the city clerk that that's been adjusted. Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we're moving to the resolution establishing the council compensation committee. Okay, would someone like to move it?
As a point of order,
Yes.
did we have consecutive votes to establish Stormwater Control Board and then vote for the stormwater budget? Just wanted to confirm.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Good.
So just to remind folks, we have the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 stormwater management budget. Councilmember Landman moved it. Councilmember Schlegel seconded. We voted. Then we had the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2026 budget. Councilmember Westlake moved it. Councilmember Gilbert seconded, and we voted.
And
Okay, we did not dissolve from being this.
We do not have to.
I see.
The next item is resolution establishing the council compensation committee. Would someone like to move it?
Moved.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Are there any points of discussion? Okay. Seeing none, and given that we're in a hybrid situation, Councilmember Honzak, I'm just going to repeat that into my mic and hopefully you can hear me. We are voting on the resolution establishing the council compensation committee now.
I hear you.
Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
yes.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Councilmember Honzak?
I
Councilmember Westlake.
Aye.
Okay, great. Last item in this voting session is a single reading ordinance approving a contract extension for technical support and necessary system upgrades associated with the relocation of the city TV control room. Would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Are there any points of discussion on this item? Councilmember DeBala?
I have one question.
Hello.
Thank you for this background information. And so, in the cover sheet, at the end, it talks about, at the end of the context section, it talks about the three different pieces of what's coming up that add together to about 396,000. That's the, where is it? The trouble, the access to the technical team, the technical support, the system support agreement, and the equipment and system upgrades. So that's smaller than the 597,000 allocated. So have we already spent some of this then?
Yes, so.
So could you please clarify
Yep.
that? Thank you.
Yes, so the amount that will be part of this contract extension is going to be a total of $148,640 and 89 cents. The contract extension is going to be covered by the what's allocated in the fiscal year 25 budget, which is $597,000. We have about $472,000 that we have budgeted for the fiscal year 25, and so we will have plenty to cover that amount.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Yes.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Councilmember?
Yes.
Perfect.
Councilmember Westlake.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much. We're going to move into our work session. The first item for the work session this evening is a presentation of the police department's annual report.
Point of order, Mayor. Good night, all.
Good
I'm going
night.
to step off.
Oh,
Thank you.
Good night.
good
Feel better.
night. Feel better.
All right, trying to get phones and everything else together. Apologize for that. So what I'm going to do is I have the annual report in front of me, but I'm going to go ahead and get into some other things before I get into that. Good evening, members of council. Is the mic on? Let me just move it a little bit closer to me. Is that better? Much better, yeah. All right. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, residents, and other stakeholders. This evening, I'm going to be presenting the annual report. But before I got into the annual report, I wanted to address, obviously, the recent settlement between the city and one of our former dispatchers, Ms. Kekila Cooper. I'm joining others, as I've said multiple times, in publicly apologizing to Ms. Cooper. The sexual harassment she experienced at the hands of one of our police department members was unacceptable and not consistent with the norms of the police department. I do want to go over some things that have already been publicly stated, just so people understand the sequence of events. When I became aware of the situation in mid-August of 2022, the allegation started in early August, I notified the city management at the time, as well as human resources. The involved staff member was suspended immediately with no contact for the public and staff members. An investigation was initiated into his conduct that resulted in sustained findings. I want to be clear, sustained findings. We only did one investigation. There's no investigation where we ever found this to be consensual. Our investigation found that sustained findings of multiple offenses. The officer was disciplined, which has now publicly been revealed. I don't need to go into the discipline. And I will mention again, as of May 7th, he's no longer a city employee. I do want to touch on a couple other things. Prior to the officer being brought back to work, senior staff met with the victim, representatives from the union, and the city's human resources director to inform the victim of the officer's the officer's return. And we wanted to develop something that was acceptable for the victim and insulated her from contact. With input from all the involved, we devised a written plan to have him return. During the investigation, claims of retaliation were introduced. Multiple investigations were initiated and completed to address these claims. These investigations, they were internal investigations, found no claims or no sustained claims of retaliation. That being said, we are now reviewing that, and I support that 100%. Reviewing those investigations, if they would have been better served to be conducted outside the department with some other logistical things. We understand that. I'm in full support of that. All of the investigations that I referred to have been released via Public Information Act request. Everything in those investigations can be reviewed. We also audio tape all of our interviews. So those are available as well through MPIA requests. So if anyone wants to know the exact questions that were asked, that could go through. We realized there could have been some things done better in these investigations. As I mentioned, outside investigator involving HR more involved. We've already made some of these changes, and we look forward to changes that may come from the audit. We've worked extremely hard to build trust within the police department over the last I'd say 7 or 8 years. Now, this case has eroded that trust, and I understand that. This is the only case of sexual harassment since I've been here in 2018. So I ask that as we move forward, that people view the police department for their personal interactions. Reserve your judgment until the audit is completed. If the audit finds findings of fault, we'll own them. As I said, good, bad, or indifferent, we're going to own what we do. So allow that audit to take its place. We will own whatever we could have done better. But I don't want the act of one individual to impact the great work that's been done by the multiple police officers that work here. So all I ask from the public is, if you're viewing our police department, give it a chance, allow the audit to take its place, view your interaction or feelings about the police department based off your personal interactions that you've had with that police officer, you've had with me, or you've had with my staff. If those are not satisfactory, the buck stops here. As one of the confidential, as Councilmember Westlick mentioned earlier, there's a lot of personal information. Respect that. And a lot of times we don't want staff to talk about that. So I just want to be clear on that. And it's not done in a way to silence someone. So I just want to be clear, crystal clear. I 100% support the audit to review what we could have done better. But please, please, please understand that we have done a lot of positive things. This is one individual. And there are a lot of questions that need to be asked and a lot of questions that need to be answered. We're here to answer those questions. All right, so with that, I will get into the annual report. I did want to touch on just one staffing thing, and I sent this to the council earlier, and that's our 30-30 pledge. In August of 2021, we were one of the first agencies in the country to sign the 30 by 30 initiative, which is a partnership of organizations dedicated to increasing the representation of women in police recruit classes in the U.S. by 30% by the year 2030. We were one of the first agencies to sign it. I'm pleased to report back that we are now at 24%. 24%. 1 out of 4 of our police officers are female. We were about 14% when we first started this initiative. Almost 40% of our entire workforce are females. In addition, 61% of our workforce are members of minority groups. This is double the national average of 30%. 63% of our overall workforce are members of minority groups. Members of the police department speak 7 different languages. It is important that we have a department that reflects the demographics of our residents. Our diversity is our strength. Just staffing wise, we currently have 39 of our 43 sworn officers positions are filled. We have 1 vacancy within our civilian ranks, and that is a crossing guard, which we anticipate making an offer very soon. We are committed also, and this is very important before I get into the annual report, to guardian policing. This has been mentioned, and this is extremely important. There was traditionally an us against them mentality with this police department, and that's not what we're about. This is reinforced. The guardian mentality is not only in philosophy, but also in policy. The guardian approach is reinforced through our evaluation and reward system as well. And just to touch on, the city in general, I keep on hearing evaluations. We haven't done evaluations in principle for 5 years because of various reasons. So no evaluations have been given to staff. And I just want to mention that from earlier comments. You know, there was an emphasis when I first got here on enforcement. And it wasn't quality enforcement, it was quantity. We de-emphasized that through the reward system, and it is now based on de-escalation and community interaction, community policing. Now I'll get into the nuts and the bolts of the annual report. And the purpose of the annual report is to provide information about our police department, about crime in the city of Tacoma Park, the accomplishments of the department, and explain how every individual can partner with the police department to make the community safer. In 2024, we continued to cultivate relationships with our stakeholders. We had several ward-specific meetings. We also had several community meetings specific to neighborhoods to discuss traffic calming and other issues. Transparency and communication is important. We put out regular alerts about crime in the city. We also put out a weekly alert as well. We did see an increase in crime in the city of Tacoma Park of about 26% of Part 1 crimes reported in 2024. Now, Part 1 crimes are those defined as serious crimes, and they are assaults, burglaries, larcenies, murders, rapes, robberies, auto thefts, theft from autos, and arsons. There was an increase from about 1,073 reportable crimes in 2023 to 1,356 in 2024. The majority of crimes at Tacoma Park are property crimes. 93% of our Part 1 crimes committed were property crimes. So with the largest percentage of individual crime being larceny. So understand when you're talking about a property crime is something that does not necessarily have an individual involved. A robbery has an individual involved. A rape has an individual involved, a murder, etc. A theft doesn't necessarily. There's a victim, but not a victim that was directly involved in the call. And I can explain that a little bit in more detail. In 2024, the Walgreens in Ward 6 accounted for a huge percentage of the overall crime, not only in Ward 6, but in our community in general. So a great partnership between the mayor, the former Ward 6 council member, the city manager. We pushed Walgreens to get 24/7 security. Since 24/7 security was put in place, there's been a drastic reduction for calls for service at that location. That is a win-win for us. We were responding to the Walgreens for various calls 6 to 8 times per day. We have had maybe a handful of calls for service at the Walgreens since then. So I'm happy to report in the first quarter of this year, we've seen a 57% decrease in crime. 57% decrease. Then reduction of crime had a lot to do with the Walgreens, believe it or not. One particular location can dictate, when you have very small crime numbers, can have a large impact on the overall crime rate. So when I talk about crime numbers, it's better to look at actual numbers as opposed to the percentages, because we have such very small incidence of crime in the city. So if you look at a large percentage increase, like 50%, 7% decrease or 26% increase, look more at the numbers as opposed to the percentages. I want to reiterate, as I said numerous times before, we take a holistic approach to addressing crime. Police cannot solve the problem. We must address the root causes of crime. And those are poverty, substance abuse, mental health, criminal justice system not designed to rehabilitate, and several other factors. The Reimagining Public Safety Task Force addressed some of these. I think there's more work that needs to be done. We are one community. 70% of the people that commit crimes in the city of Tacoma Park don't live here. But if we do our part to provide these programs to the people that do live in our city, we're going to see a reduction. I will get into the individual report, but I just want to touch on some of the overall crime. Ward 6, again, represents the largest portion of crime in the city at 62%. Ward 2 follows at 15%, Ward 3 at 9%. Ward 1 accounted for 1%, and Ward 4, 5%, and Ward 3 at 3%. Or, excuse me, Ward 5 at 3%. In response to the increase of crime, we've instituted high-profile patrols, both bicycle patrols, foot patrols, covert patrols, as well as uniform patrols. And we're able to identify problem areas through data analytics. We have a crime analyst that does daily reports to us that tells us hotspots, tells us when things are occurring. So that the printout will show, okay, we had 4 thefts on Trescott between these particular hours, and it allows us to pinpoint our patrols as opposed to just randomly patrolling. That has been proven to be very, very beneficial to having officers in areas when problems are occurring. We do the same thing for traffic enforcement as well. Traffic and pedestrian safety is a priority of our agency. We have very, very good partnerships with the State Highway Administration, good partnerships with our other partners here with our other departments. We're really looking forward to having a traffic planner on board. I think that's really going to solidify some things, taking a much more holistic approach at looking at traffic problems in the city. What we used to do is we would do what's called one-off. So we would address an issue in one part of the city on one roadway, and it would cause a problem elsewhere. So the purple line is that X factor, because we don't understand at times the impact the purple line has on overall traffic. So what we're trying to do now is get a lot of traffic counts in and around the purple line to understand a baseline. So when the purple line comes online, we can understand, okay, was it purple line construction or was it this or that? So we're looking to have a citywide, kind of a study of traffic flow as opposed to these one-offs that we're doing. We've also added a couple more traffic counters so we can expand in the city. They're in popular demand. We've also developed another partnership with the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Association to have another camera trailer that they purchased for us. So these are things that I think are really important, for just a force multiplier. And I just want to briefly go into some of the collisions in the city. We had 194 reportable incidents. There needs to be a correction, I think, on the copy that you have. It said 206. We've since made a correction to that. We didn't have any fatal collisions in the city, which is good, in 2024. But we did have an increase in our collisions with injuries, went from 160 to 143. Those are concerning because a lot of fender benders are not as concerning if someone taps the back of another bumper. We're really concerned when we start having accident with injuries. So we're really, really pleased to bring on our red light camera program. We brought on 7 cameras that are fully functional now. A lot of our accidents are related to red light running and related to intersections. We're also very, very pleased that we're going to have stop signs. Baltimore City and Tacoma Park were carved out. Deputy Chief Philippos was just in Annapolis with Governor Moore signed the bill. We are going to be able to institute a pilot program here in the city of Tacoma Park, both us and Baltimore City. Prince George's County already had a carve out for just Prince George's County. So within the next couple of weeks, we're going to be analyzing a lot of different areas and trying to figure out the best placement for those cameras. We're pretty confident that we can touch just about every area of the city, hopefully. So we expect to have that program up and running pretty quickly. I just informed the city manager today, a little bit of disappointment on New Hampshire and University. We were told that it's probably going to be pushed back to next year. Yeah, they're telling us that the tracks haven't been laid properly, or the intersection's not constructed properly. So I'm going to be meeting with the city manager tomorrow. We're going to push back heavily on HSA, or State Highway. I don't know why I use the acronym. I always mess it up. State Highway Administration to push that. That intersection alone has more violations than all of the other 7 locations in the city. And just think, with the added pedestrian traffic that's going to be in that area, it is paramount that we get those installed. So we may call on you, the elected body, to come out and assist us if we need a little push with the State Highway Administration.
Excuse me.
Yes.
For people who are watching, are they seeing just the cover of the report as you're going through? I'm not sure.
Yeah, right now I'm just
Okay.
yeah, I'm just giving a synopsis.
A synopsis,
Once
thank you.
once we get into it, I'll filter through the report. So they're not I don't know what they're seeing at home. I don't know if they should be seeing me, not the cover.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure. Maybe City TV they should be seeing me right now, not the cover sheet. Is that what you guys are saying?
Yep,
Okay. All right.
I see a thumbs up. Yep.
All right.
Thanks.
Hopefully they're seeing me, because I'm seeing, if they're not, all right. All right. I just want to talk about training. The Tacoma Park Police Department, both sworn and non-sworn, training remains a priority. It enhances skills, identifies gaps and capabilities and procedures. Tacoma Park police officers, like all sworn officers, do 18 hours of annual certification. We also do enhanced training. We do active bystander for law enforcement training. We just had de-escalation training that we hosted here through COPS. It's important for us to have that extra enhanced training. We also, almost all of our officers have enhanced crisis intervention training. That's really important. Even though we have a crisis clinician on board, she's not always working. So it's very important that the officers that we have can de-escalate and not escalate. I just want to talk about the number of complaints, and that's in the report as well. The department received 13 complaints, 13 in 2024. 7 of them were submitted by community members, and six were submitted internally to the chief of police or a member of the command staff. We highly encourage people to complain if they're dissatisfied. Let me say that again. We highly encourage people internally or externally to complain if they're dissatisfied. We investigate all complaints. All complaints are also screened, complaints from the public are screened through the Montgomery County Police Accountability Board, as well as the findings are screened through the Montgomery County Administrative Charging Committee. So I just wanted to give you that perspective. So we had 14,664 contacts with the public last year. So the number of complaints is less than 1% of all the contacts we had with the public last year. We talked about de-escalation. We talked about training. That's really important. Part of ensuring officers' use of force is only when necessary and proportional to each situation is making sure all use of force incidents are investigated. The Tacoma Park Police has a stringent reporting guidelines. All use of force incidents, all of them are investigated. So we had 9 incidents in 2024 where use of force was either used or shown. That's a 59% decrease from 2022, where we had 22 incidents. 4 of these incidents were show of force. Show of force is if someone takes out their taser, someone takes out their gun, but they receive compliance, no use of force was actually executed. 8 of the 9 use of forces were deemed to be justified and in accordance to department policy. 1 was determined to be not in accordance to department policy, which resulted in a recommendation of disciplinary action. So just to give you a perspective, the Tacoma Park police officers, again, had 14,664 calls for service. The number of uses of force account for 0.0006% of all of the calls for service. I just want to touch on our staff as well for a little bit. So 70% of our entire workforce has been hired in the last 8 years. There's a lot of new officers on the staff, a lot of new supervisors, one that's in the back of the room, Corporal Torres. So I think it's important that people are here because they want to be here. They come to the police department because I can tell you right now, it is hard to recruit. It is really hard to recruit. People come here because they like what we're doing. They like the guardian mentality. They like that they can give back in a small, full-service community. So I'm very proud of the workforce we have. I just want one last thing before I start answering your question. And it is Police Week, and we're recognizing law enforcement officers, and it's also Mental Health Awareness Month. This is a very, very stressful job, and I want people to understand day in and day out what it takes. Councilmember Gilbert can attest to that. So understand that everything we do has an impact on others. So understand that everything we do, there are people involved. Some of them are officers, some of them are family members, but understand that. And mental health is paramount. We stress it's okay to not be okay. I say that all the time. I'm the first one to get services that I needed, but understand that, and understand that we are human beings and we do a very difficult job. So I will say to every Tacoma Park police officer and every police officer who straps on the uniform, thank you. Thank you. It is a noble profession and it is not easy to do. And I think we do it with quality here in Tacoma Park and with respect. With that, I will start scanning in the report if you have any questions.
Thank you. So, Chief, I just want to confirm, are you going through the slide deck now?
No, that was it. I was going to answer questions.
Okay.
It's 100.
Yeah, no, this is the report.
No.
I think people thought it was a PowerPoint.
No.
This is the actual document.
City TV just put up the report.
Okay, perfect. All right. So first, I just want to say thank you very much. It is always a pleasure to be able to read through the annual report, because while there are some things like crime that can be scary, there's also things like adopting a cat while on the job that I think is just a true testament to the culture that we're trying to bring within the police department.
I would argue dog would be better, but
the cat was cute, and I'm not even a cat person.
That cat was super cute. If you've seen it, it was super cute.
I am a dog person through and through, but that kitten was very cute. So I do just want to ask a quick question, particularly because we have been, with Ward 6 and the larceny in particular, it's just commercial based. And I know that there's been conversations around, are there some other places where we could do a little bit more? I know there's been conversations about making sure that we're having our cameras up in strategic locations. Are there things like that that might be useful for the police department or council support to kind of help with identifying where those spots are in the city that would benefit from cameras? And can you just remind everyone about how that data is stored and how it's ultimately used based on the cameras that we put around the city?
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to echo again or put out that Montgomery County extended their camera rebate to residents in Tacoma Park. So previously that wasn't available. So that's really important. So any resident or business owner that wants to get a camera can get a $250 rebate. That's really important. So it's really important that we have the surveillance in key areas. So if you register with us and you have a camera, we don't have access to your video real time. If we have an incident, say on Walnut, we had a theft from auto, we will know that there are 4 people in the 7400 block of Walnut that have cameras, and we can reach out to them and say, hey, look, in between 4 and 5 o'clock on April 13th, we had an incident. Will you be willing to give us the video? We don't have access, nor does Montgomery County have access to your real video. As far as the camera trailer data, yeah, it doesn't. It's not stored and sent to MCAT. It's not none of that. It is data for the police department to use for, if we have an incident, we can go back. If we need to do real surveillance, a lot of what it does is it's a deterrent. The most successful applications we've had probably was when we had all the shootings over on Eastern Avenue in the area of 4th and 5th. We placed that camera when it was brand new there, and we had almost 0 incidents. Where we used to have every other night, we'd have sound of shots. So when we place that camera in locations, what we get is a reduction of crime. Now, we have solved crimes because of the camera. So right now, there are 2 in the Como-Langley Crossroads. One is on Ann Street, really important. We also have one that's our own that we move around. It's always in popular demand. People always want it placed because they know. Now, we don't place the camera into your living room. That's not what it's about. It is about targeted public areas. So we're not going to place a camera that's going to look in your living room or your privacy. What we're trying to do is place cameras in areas where it's a public domain and there should be no expectation of privacy. We only had 1 complaint thus far that a resident felt that the camera might have been, and we just moved it immediately. If you feel like it's in any way invading your privacy, you can notify us and we'll move it. We have a lot of different ways that we capture videos through the police department, and we had a long conversation about license plate readers and what they do. We had a long conversation. We brought the red light cameras up. What are they doing? What are they recording? So if it would be helpful, because we have so many different kind of ways that we use either automated enforcement video or video for surveillance or so on and so forth. So when we go back to the Reimagine a Public Safety Task Force discussion, I think it's important that we at least can address some of those issues. We had a whole session on LPRs, but this council was not there. They didn't get the benefit of that. So maybe just a rehash of all of our automated technologies, what they do record, what they don't record, what is the technology, and so on and so forth might be helpful.
Right. Thank you very
Sure.
much. Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, thank you for everything you've done for the city. And thank you to all of the, what did you say, 39 officers and support staff that work for the city. I totally appreciate you and the culture that you're developing of guardianship. Couple questions. One is, do you see in these numbers, other than the Walgreens, in the crime numbers, do you see anything other than the Walgreens, any trends up, down? Last year the answer was shed thefts. So yeah, what do you see this time around?
So 2 different aspects. I will say you the biggest change was in thefts, larcenies, and that was the Walgreens. Most of our other Part 1 crimes have remained consistent. They haven't fluctuated significantly one way or the other. So when we look at trends, usually it's about like a theft trend, or when we had the shed burglaries, there was a trend of shed burglaries. We didn't necessarily see that trend in any one particular issue this year.
Okay.
The year before, we had the food truck robberies. So we didn't necessarily see that this year. But I will go back to the importance of analyzing data and having a crime analyst. We get real-time data. Every day he produces data, not only for Tacoma Park, but we also get data from across the region. So we can analyze like cases. So, for example, when we had the food truck robberies, we could compare with other detectives. Well, we had similar food truck robberies in Prince George's County. We had them in Montgomery County. So when we solved our case, we also solved multiple cases in Montgomery County. So it's really important that data is shared not only internally for our officers for day-to-day patrols and hotspots, but also for the region to understand crime trends in general.
So the two other areas I'd like you to address either right now or after everybody else asks their questions. One is the question of certification that came up by a couple residents brought up, and you and I have talked about this before, but let's have you share for everybody else. And the other is the related to your report on complaints and investigations, which is the efforts that you and your command staff have made over the years to make organizational change. What do you do you see going forward? What do you think is stubbornly resistant to change? What part of the culture are you still trying to work on? Or would you, at this point, want to park that question, given the audit and some of the things that are going on right now? So those two areas I'd like to hear a little more about. Thank you.
All right. I counted like 3 in there, but I'll do the Kalia one first. So
Yeah, one of them was a comment.
I sent a little bit of background to the council about Kalia, the Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. The Tacoma Park Police Department was previously accredited. The former chief, Chief Goldberg, did an analysis, as my former agency did, and we went away from Kalia. Kalia is very costly. It's also very labor intensive. To be candid, if we evaluate Kalia, we also need to evaluate FTEs. It is very, very labor intensive to provide the 447 proofs. I will say that, and I think Councilmember Schlegel made a comment, if we're not going to evaluate Kalia, let's evaluate what our policies are in comparison. And that's a fair statement. I'm not against Kalia necessarily. When I first got here, we did an assessment of whether or not we thought Kalia was best for the city. As many agencies have gone away from it, they went away from it. If it's the council's will or the city manager's will to reevaluate that, that's fine. But understand, Kalia doesn't, if you don't have Kalia certification, it does not mean that your agency is deficient or not certified. There's no requirement to be Kalia certified. It is a private organization. There are a lot of organizations in Maryland, but only 4 to 5% of law enforcement agencies across the country are Kalia certified. So there's monetary implications. There's also staffing implications. But I think if we're evaluating this, and we could talk about this during the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, if we're evaluating this, we need to evaluate it, as Councilmember Schlegel said, okay, well, if we don't have Kalia, how are we ensuring that our policies are meeting those standards? And that's fair. And I think that we have a regular review of all of our general orders. All of our general orders are consistent with state law, federal law, and they go above and beyond. We do things like our general orders, like we don't release the mugshots of arrestees. So we go above and beyond on some things. But it is important for the public to understand what Kalia is, what our standards are in relation. All of our general orders are on our website. That's state law. You can find them on our website. And you can compare them to Kalia standards. So we'd be more than happy to have that discussion. I'm not by any means against Kalia. I came from an agency that had Kalia and went away from it for various reasons. Most of it was monetary. It just was very expensive and very labor intensive. But I think it's a conversation that we definitely can have. And if there's a will to do that, I think the first step would be to compare what our policies are in comparison to the Kalia standards. And I think the second question was just about culture, and I think I encourage the audit because I want there to be an understanding. And I said earlier, this is the only sexual harassment claim that's been made since I've been here. I don't tolerate it. My staff does not tolerate it. But I think it's very important. It's easy for me to stand up here as your chief and say that. I think it's very important that we do a full review of whatever was done, and if we can improve, we need to. If people need to be held accountable, that's fine. But the only way that we are going to have full confidence that this was done right is to have an independent review that does not involve me, does not involve the city manager, does not involve the city attorney, does not involve limited staff that you all manage. I support that. And if after that it comes back and we have some chronic problem, then maybe I don't need to be your chief. But I'm confident that we do not have a chronic sexual harassment or condoning harassment or retaliation in our police department. We don't. We wouldn't attract females to come here. 4 of our last 5 people that we've hired, people talk. People talk. They know the culture of this agency. They know the culture of this agency. They know we hold people accountable. Since I've been chief, I've terminated 3 people, 2 officers and 1 civilian. I don't hesitate to hold people accountable. I don't know if you all remember, but when I first got here, there was a mass exodus of people that did not like what we were doing. They did not like the philosophy. They left, And we hired people that we want here because they understand this culture. So if you're asking what I would change, the culture is what we want. Can mistakes be made? Yes. Do mistakes indicate a chronic, systematic problem with the entire police department? I would say no, but let the audit determine that. You know, in any profession, there are going to be people that do things they shouldn't do, period. But that is not a reflection. And as I go back to evaluate your view of this police department, if you've had an officer come out to your house in the middle of the night to take a burglary report, if you've ever interacted with me, the deputy chief, or anyone else in the police department, how were you treated? How were you treated? We had 6 complaints from the public last year, 6, over 14,000 interactions. Compare other agencies and their percentage of complaints that they get. Those are extremely low. And a lot of them are, I didn't want to get a parking ticket, so I'm now complaining. Those are some of the tenor. Not all of them are these serious allegations. So to answer your question, I'm very proud of the staff that we have. I'm very proud of the diversity. I'm very proud of what they represent. Always room for improvement. As I've said, I'm not perfect. I stand here and if I could have done things better, and that's what the audit comes back and says, I'm willing to own that. I will stand before you all and own that, just as everybody else that may or may not have been involved. We already have looked at what was done in that case and made changes. We know that we should have gone outside with these investigations. That would have created so less scrutiny over this. We know that we need to involve HR in the process. So we already identified those things. But I'm hoping that there are things that we can come out and say, as a city as a whole, we can do, maybe we do annual training, but maybe we can do this enhanced training, or maybe we can do this interactive training, or maybe we can have a committee of employees that can be a resource if someone feels a certain way. So you don't necessarily have to go to a person of authority, but you can go to somebody, a peer. So we have that within the police department. We have peer support where people can go and complain about stuff. But maybe we can develop something like that at a higher level. So that's what we're looking to accomplish. But I am proud of the staff that are here. And until until the audit is done, which I encourage being done, let's just reserve judgment. Look at what's in this report. Look at what's being done. Bad things happen, but we need to learn from what happens and learn from our mistakes, mine, the city managers, deputy city managers, the mayor. So sorry, I got long-winded on that. Sorry about that.
A little bit. It's almost time for us to move on to the next topic. All right, who was next? Councilmember Lehman.
I hadn't raised my hand yet.
Thank you, Chief. I want to say, with respect to what the work is of the police department, I've been participating in the police academy process, as has Councilmember Westlake, and I have learned an enormous amount from that. They're to be commended, the staff who put it together, Kathy Plevy and Mark McInerney, who've been excellent teachers. And part of what I have learned is some of the details of what the day-to-day job consists of and just exactly how difficult and stressful it is. And I appreciate your comments in support of your team who do these difficult jobs. I do, and I appreciate your statements of support for the audit, which we will be conducting through the work of the council. I do have a few questions about the report, and I like the kitten. Nothing against the kitten, but I find it difficult to compare. Year on year, you're offering a comparison of how we are doing vis-a-vis previous years for the city of Tacoma Park, but I find it difficult to evaluate the performance of the department vis-a-vis police departments writ large. The performance metrics that are in the report, for example, they don't really align directly with the performance metrics in the Montgomery County Police Department, for example. There might be city police departments that would offer better comparisons, but I wonder whether you have considered offering some comparisons to like-sized or like-positioned departments that would enable us to evaluate whether this is a high or a low number of crimes, whether this is a high or a low number of incidences of complaints. And just as an example, I did do a little bit of comparison myself today to try and understand this, and I see differentials between the county police department and our department. in some areas, looking at this resolution rate or solution rate, I'm not sure the proper term, for Part 1 crimes. And they report in the county document annual report what their time between getting a call and arriving at a crimes or at a problem in progress, but I don't see data like that in your report. So I wonder if you could comment on how the report might be going forward, how a report might provide us with a better understanding of that, because looking at it in isolation without other context makes it harder to evaluate performance, in my opinion.
I appreciate that. Understand, this is an annual report representing what we do here in the city of Tacoma Park. It's not a comparison of other agencies. That being said, the city is doing a citywide performance metrics program, and there are several metrics that the police department has put forward. For example, we've done the calls for service response time analysis, but it's not fair to the county because we're a 2.3 square mile radius city compared to them. We have much better response times, but it's an apples to oranges comparison when we only have to respond maybe a mile and when they have to respond 5 miles. Can we do a comparison of other like agencies? Absolutely. We would just need to know exactly what that is. That wouldn't necessarily go into our annual report because we're just representing what we do. But if there's a desire to have an analysis to say Hyattsville or Gaithersburg or somewhere else, you also understand we're a full service agency as well. We're the only full service agency in municipality in the state other than the larger agencies like Baltimore City. So yeah, I mean, I think there's benefit in that, but you also have to understand data and what you're getting. And is it an apples?
Obviously, no, I'm not asking for like every single apple to every single apple, but I'm glad that the performance metrics are front and center for you. And I think it would be helpful if we looked at our police metrics going forward to have them be ones that are commonly used by police departments. And I wonder whether that, I mean, we don't need to get into that tonight. We're going to be talking about performance metrics in a couple of weeks, but looking at that, I'm glad to hear that you're amenable to the idea that the report would perhaps use those type of metrics to help us make comparisons going forward.
Well, I think one thing that I do want to just note, so as part of COG, Council of Governments, there is an effort underway to create what is in essence a dashboard that would bring together certain crime stats across the region, and of which Tacoma Park is participating in that. So I think it's important for us to just be mindful of what stats may be appropriate and comparable across other jurisdictions. There's work that's been happening to try to identify ways to have make sure that the terminology is consistent across the various jurisdictions that are participating in that dashboard, which may be very different from the metrics that would make sense for our community that would be a part of the performance metrics work that's happening within the city. So there is an effort underway, a region-wide effort underway to come up with a dashboard that would present some data that could be compared across jurisdictions.
Well, that's helpful to know about. Thank you, Mayor. And I'm interested in what you say about whether our data would or would not fit into that. I think
we're already a part of it.
Okay. Well, you're just you're pointing to the fact that every jurisdiction is different, and not every analytic point is necessarily all that useful. But it's good to be part of a system like that because, as the chief was saying, a lot of our crimes are cross-jurisdictional.
Well, I think one of the things, I don't want what I said to be misdescribed. So my understanding from being a part of the COG executive board is that there are ways in which different jurisdictions may categorize what is a larceny and what types of crimes would be included in that count. And so what they did was bring all of these different jurisdictions together to try to come up with a way so like is like in terms of how they're capturing types of crimes that could then be part of this ultimate dashboard that they are creating. So just
to be mindful of the fact, to the chief's point, every jurisdiction may even categorize certain types of crimes differently in terms of the terminology that's used. And so that was one of the goals of the COG dashboard, is to try to make sure that we're doing like compared to like, and then you have jurisdictions in Maryland, Virginia, DC that would be a part of this dashboard where you could actually see by jurisdiction the data. And so that is something that is underway, and we are a part of that. Just saying that to say that gets at the point that you're raising, like what are some ways in which we can compare our crime data to other jurisdictions. There's work underway at a regional level to try to put something together.
And Mayor, if I could just touch on that, it's not just about crime, it's either. And we're going to be having the Public Safety Task Force review in a couple weeks. And I sat through every one of those meetings. And when they were asked to review whether or not they should review having the county police come in and police the city of Tacoma Park, it was unanimous that they didn't even want to discuss it. And you can get that directly from the people on the board. So it's not just about crime, it's the services that we're providing outside of that. It's what we respond to. So if you call from a theft from auto, do you get an officer respond to your residence, or do you have to call the telephone reporting unit? So there's other things besides just crime. And one of the things we're looking at through the metrics is customer service satisfaction. How do our residents feel about their police department, the services we provide, and how do they feel? Do they feel safe? Do they feel like they are overrun with crime? So those are really important factors as well, because a lot of times it's the perception of crime, not necessarily crime, that it can be worse than actual crime. So I welcome if there are certain data points that you would like to for us to provide. We can definitely see if we can and provide those. We were asked for the calls for service. We provided that. If there's other closure rates you'd like from our detectives, we can provide that as well.
May I, I'll defer to my colleague and come back to me. I don't want to hog the limelight here.
Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you so much, Chief Duvall. This is really useful information. I just wanted to give a big thanks to the Public Information Manager, Kathy Plevy, for putting this together. It's a really great report. And I think the most impressive statistic in there is the use of force. That's just really the idea that 0.06% of contacts, any use of force, and that's really, really to be commended. My question is about the arrests. It's on page 15, has the graph on that, but I'm just curious if you can speak to the total arrests, to the total crimes. Like, does this feel like a good place that we're landing? Is there a lot of room to grow in that area? Is it common for if you could speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
I'm really glad you asked that. And this came up in the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force as well. And we gave a report of all of our arrests by zip code of the arrestee, race of the arrestee, age of the arrestee, location of the arrestee, all of that information. So we have seen a very large reduction in the number of overall arrests in the city. But what you've seen is quality arrests. So when I'm looking at arrest, when I first got here, there was a reward system for tickets and for arrest. That in itself caused people to go out and do meaningless traffic enforcement and meaningless criminal enforcement. So what we want from officers is quality enforcement. If you look at our arrests, a lot of them are for quality things. They're not for low level. We used to have, when marijuana was illegal, that's all you would see. And it disproportionately affected a certain segment of our community. And it really, really caused a disconnect from a lot of our youth of color who not only were being stopped, but they were being photographed, they were being put in books, and so on and so forth. So I think it's really important when you're looking at arrest numbers, it's not about the overall numbers, it's about delving into where we are as far as those numbers. A large percentage of people arrested by us don't live in the city. They don't live in the city. They live in Hyattsville, they live in Montgomery County. And if you go back and you look, and we're going to talk about the Public Safety Task Force, and we can get into all the data analytics we provided, I think that's really important because that gives you a really good idea of, over the years, types of arrest and quality of arrest. So when you're looking at, it's not, to me, it's not about numbers. We don't require a certain number of arrests, a certain number of tickets. We require people to know where hotspots are in their community and to patrol them. That may result in arrest, but we don't want people going out and pulling people over for a tail light out. What's the purpose? If you're doing traffic enforcement, it needs to be quality of traffic enforcement. It needs to be in an area that we know that there are problems, not just randomly sitting. We used to have an officer that used to sit at the stop sign down here, and as people are smiling, they probably got stopped by him. But we didn't have any accidents at that intersection. Why are you sitting there other than to get your numbers? I want the officers out on Wildwood. I want them on New Hampshire Avenue. I want them in the locations that there are going to be problems. So we don't discourage our staff from arresting people by any means. We encourage them to, but it has to be quality arrest. And if you look at our arrest numbers, they're not for, low level, trespassing. And you may have that because sometimes that's a tool, especially with businesses, for repeat offenders that impede people's business because they repeatedly loiter and are disorderly. I think that once again, when you start looking at numbers, we can do that and we can do an analysis, but what you're going to see is a drastic reduction in both traffic enforcement and arrest. It's really important because especially for juveniles, when juveniles get arrested, it's really impactful. Now, granted, not a lot of significant consequences, and that's another story completely about the changes of law, but that's a significant negative interaction with the police. When your first interaction with the police is negative, that's lasting. We want your first interaction to be in our lobby where we're coming in and our lobby was packed today. Now, it was a little bit too loud. We had to quiet them down, but they're respectful. But we want the police department lobby to be a place where our youth can come and congregate. Everywhere I go, youth know me. Hey, Chief. That's what we want, to feel comfortable with our law enforcement officers. But anytime you have those negative interactions, it goes against that. So I say this all the time, and I've said it multiple times since I got here. Until we take a holistic approach to what is causing crime to be committed, lack of early childhood education, lack of nutrition, lack of jobs, lack of all of these things, we are going to be perpetuating the cycle. We, the police, are not going to solve the issue. We are not. We are part of the issue. And I didn't even mention our rehabilitation system that doesn't rehabilitate. So I went long-winded about arrests, but it's not about the numbers. It's about what the arrests are for, and we're very targeted in what we do.
Okay. One last question, so that we can move on to the next item. Councilmember Schlegel.
Let me pick.
You can bundle if you want. I'll ask a couple of you.
Yeah, come.
Yeah.
Cindy did it.
Cindy always.
I just got to remember. I might have to.
Mayor.
All right, we'll give Councilmember Schlegel a little time. Councilmember Gilbert.
I'll hit it. I did want to say that I appreciated what you said about the mental health of officers. One of my best friends is a retired police officer, and I hope that in this whole audit process that there's an eagerness, to find out, who's responsible and the act of harassment, the act of retaliation when it happens, the act, any kind of abusive act is a form of objectifying a human being and taking away their humanity. And I hope that this audit will in no way objectify anybody in the city and take away their humanity. I appreciated what you said about mental health. I guess of my questions, I think maybe the most helpful for us as a group would be, so thinking about the prevalence of crimes by juveniles, as you discussed at the summit, can you think of any any requests for this council in terms of trying to develop a coordinated nexus of ways for young people to find constructive things to do rather than the recreational thefts and things like that.
I think that's a really good point, and it's a really good segue to the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force recommendations. A lot of them are related to jobs for youth, education for youth, recreational activities for youth. So when we get into that, I think that's really important. So growing up in the city, and others on the dais can attest to this, we are who we are because of what was offered here in the city. Whether it was the Boys and Girls Club, whether it was our mentors, because any one of us could have swayed the other way, and many of the people we grew up did. But these programs make a difference. So if we're talking about what the council can do, it can really advocate and support youth programs, but also job programs. One of the best programs that I've seen in this region, no matter what you think of Marion Barry, his summer jobs youth program did more to develop young men and young women of color than any other program I am aware of. So if we can, in some way, develop a job exchange where we, as a city, can connect our youth with businesses in the city, that would be phenomenal. So if we start looking into the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, we have scholarships for a lot of our residents, but I really think we could do more. I think the library is going to be a phenomenal resource, but what programs do we develop through the library? What programs do we have here? We have this huge auditorium. Can we do more? Can we do more with youth basketball? Can we do more with all of these things? As a person that personally benefited from those programs, I can speak to the absolute wealth of those programs. So that, and from a law standpoint, I understand completely why the state changed laws pertaining to juveniles. You shouldn't be able to arrest an 8-year-old. That's ridiculous. But what they developed went in the other direction, and a lot of our youth know what they can and can't do. So an even balance. I want to keep the protections, for the youth, but it's so even hard to even have a conversation with a youth that are a young person who commits a crime who wants to say, hey, I know who the 5 other people were, but you can't talk to them because of all these parameters. So I think there's a way to advocate in a way that's still very respectful of the youth in our community. One of the things that we've really developed is partnerships with our youth, and I do not want that to change.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Gilbert?
Yeah. Thanks, Chief. That's really impressive report. I wanted to speak really quick about Kalia, and I was here as a young pup, I think, when we had it, and probably made it to middle management before we let it go. And our standards didn't change, as Chief mentioned. We stayed standard and even exceeded in some cases. The challenge for keeping Kalia, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, was it every 3 years that we had to recert, was the staffing demand and showing proof when it was time to recert. I remember managers having to sleep in the station for essentially days, hustling to try to get all the records up to date, to make sure that the reports were in on time. And that's a heck of a challenge. And I think we probably have to look harder at our FTEs to be able to get it and keep it. We still served at standard, as said, and it didn't stop the occasional bad actor. Every once in a while, we'd have an officer go off the rails, and that speaks to what you're talking about when you talk in terms of mental health. And I've watched decline of officers due to the staffing needs and occasion and some of the demands. So, but yeah, you can have it, and it's a great standard, and it's a great stamp to have on the cars, etc. But our standards has been our standard for a long time, and it hasn't changed much.
And if I can just touch on that, when Councilmember Gill was talking about proofs, so we can have all these policies in place, but we need to provide proofs. So for 447 things, sometimes these things don't even happen. So we have to then provide a written justification why this didn't happen. So we can get into the details, but it is very labor intensive to provide the proofs. It's very labor intensive to have to fly the instructors out to do the review. It's very expensive. Like I say, I stand behind our policies, and I think the first step to be, okay, well, let's pull up the CALEA standards and let's see where our policies are. If they compare, okay. If they don't, then let's review where we are. I think that should be the first step. We did that. We did that in 2018, and our policies, as Councilmember Gilbert said, either met or exceeded all CALEA standards.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you again. We will be continuing this conversation and while we are discussing the Public Safety Task Force recommendations, as well as revisiting the council's resolution.
Thank you very much.
For the goals for the
Madam
police
Mayor,
department.
I have some other questions which I will submit to the chief in writing, and I'll copy my colleagues so that everybody can see the questions. I don't want to, violate the rules.
That's great. And I also I'm checking with city management. Typically with these kinds of questions that are transferred over, the responses will be shared back with council. If we could just make sure that that happens in this case. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Our last item this evening is a discussion of the legislative action requests to be submitted to MML. All right. And unfortunately, our Annapolis legislative lobbyist is unavailable this evening, but she and I have gone back and forth. So I'm going to walk everyone through things. All right. Presentation mode. Okay, excellent. And I'm just going to see if I can. Okay, perfect. All right. So it's the time of the year again where we are responsible for developing or submitting for the city the Maryland Municipal League Legislative Action Requests, or LARs. Okay, so what is an MML LAR? So the Legislative Action Request provides municipalities with an opportunity to inform the legislative priorities of MML, right? I'm sorry? Okay. MML for the upcoming legislative session, right? So MML, what they do, the Maryland Municipal League, is they pursue legislative changes to the benefit of all Maryland municipalities. And so once a year, each municipality can submit 3 legislative action requests. Okay, so how does the legislative action request relate to the legislative session? So this first section just kind of walks through the process of the MML legislative action requests. So we're going to have our work group session today. We need to submit our legislative actions to MML. There's a form that Ann will fill out on our behalf by May 30th. Now, we don't have to have formal approval on those legislative action requests until July 1st, meaning the legislative body, meaning us, would have to vote on them. My hope is that once we develop them, we vote on them to give Ann the okay to send them forward, and that will then be our legislative action. Now, what happens is all of the LARs that are received from the various municipalities within the state, they are researched by staff and presented to members of the legislative committee. And I know that there's been some challenges with newer council members receiving the MML emails, but you may have seen an email where the Maryland Municipal League is asking for people who want to volunteer to be on the various boards for MML. And one of them is the legislative committee. And then there's another that's for the board of directors, right? So what happens is staff they'll take all of the LARs that all of the municipalities send forward. Remember, we're limited to 3 each for each municipality. The staff look them over, they're presented to the members of that legislative committee, and then the legislative committee then votes and recommends no more than 4 issues to the MML board of directors. And those are the issues, once they're finally approved, those are the issues that MML during the upcoming legislative session will be pushing. Now, they'll cover other things, but the main things that they will really be trying to push are those legislative action requests that ultimately are vetted and cleared from all of the municipalities. Now, just as a reminder, in early December, the City Council typically meets with our District 20 team. And that's when we talk through our legislative priorities as well. So sometimes it's really helpful for us to go through the LAR process. We see where MML is leaning. And then by the time December comes around, we have an idea of what's in, what may not be in, and what we may ultimately want to advocate for on our own behalf. And just as a reminder, the 2026 General Assembly session starts January 14th. And just as a reminder, there's an election year for all members of the General Assembly and the governor. So I just want to do a quick recap because we did meet with the District 20 delegation in December. And I just want to do a quick recap of what are some of the legislative actions that we talked about with D20, where they landed in terms of the legislative session. And then I'll kind of walk you all through what we submitted in terms of the MML LAR last year. And then we can kind of talk briefly about, okay, so where do we want to reconcile? So just as a reminder, back in December, we talked through priorities from the perspective of our old council priorities: advancing community belonging, fiscally sustainable government, environmentally sustainable community, community development for an improved and equitable quality of life, and then the engaged, responsive, service-oriented government. So for the advancing a community of belonging, we specifically asked for District 20 to continue to advocate advocacy efforts focused on immigration rights and needs, including increasing access to services and protecting against mass deportation. Now, specifically, we were talking about the sensitive data, the 287G program, and then providing legal services. So protecting the data that organizations have. And that actually moved forward in Annapolis. Fund support services for residents facing deportation. There's some aspects of that that's been done. The only thing that has not been pushed is the, that did not pass in the last session that we were asking for related to that item, is the 287G program. That was the one thing that did not get pushed. Now,
excuse me, what is 287?
Sure. So the 287G program is basically where local police departments can, under an agreement with ICE, basically it allows them to aid ICE when it comes to enforcement of immigration law. So you sign up to participate in this program. There are some police departments within the state that are a part of the 287G program. We were pushing D20 last year to say, hey, can you just ban these altogether within the state? That didn't necessarily happen. And so that's of the items that we were lobbying for here, that was the last item. And I think CASA was as well. That was one of the last items that was left standing. do I think that that's something that we would need to necessarily try to get MML to push? I would say probably not. They probably wouldn't be willing to, because there's differences in terms of the thoughts around that. But I do think that it's something that if we choose to, with the next administration, with the next legislative session, to continue to push, we could. The other item is protecting residents from discrimination, such as affirming LGBTQ rights and funding support for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. So we haven't really, there were some things, just, you know, in terms of, and it was like, there's some stuff, but not really much. Now, the other items, advocacy for the federal workforce and addressing notification requirements for the restricted covenants law, those things were done. And for the restricted covenants, MML did weigh in on that. So, so for the most part, those items were addressed. Now, when it comes to the fiscally sustainable government, yeah, you'll see where I'm leaning. So the first item, we asked D20 to collaboratively explore potential sources of new revenue streams for municipalities. The authority to collect sales tax, receive a percentage of sales tax collected in jurisdiction, and MML through, and this is where that connection that maybe folks didn't realize, because of the LAR process that happened earlier in the year, when we were talking to the District 20 delegation, we were able to say, and MML is really pushing the food and beverage tax, right? And that's a proposal that they put forward. So that's what we had asked District 20 to try to support. The other item was protect municipalities' highway user revenues reimbursements. Now, at the time, there was a question as to whether or not that was on the bubble in terms of where the budget was looking. But we got some assurances and that it was pretty safe. Anne thinks it may still be okay, but we don't know how bad the budget's going to be. And then support, and MML always will push for the highway user revenues. The other piece is support legislation to create more efficiencies in the tax code, which would benefit working families. Again, didn't really see much there, in large part because money wasn't really there. So that's just another thing that we want to keep in mind. Now, the other big thing that we, sure.
I should know the answer, but on the food beverage tax, what was the outcome on that?
We didn't pass.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so the environmentally sustainable community, we push for support of legislation that is focused on building electric charging infrastructure throughout the state, continue to support funding to advance energy efficiency in buildings, and support stormwater mitigation efforts, including funding and technical assistance geared to use in municipalities. Now, in chatting with Anne, some of it went through, but I'm not sure if enough of it did. So, so we'll need to think through whether or not it makes sense, particularly as it relates to the electric charging infrastructure and some energy efficiencies in buildings, especially if we're thinking that because of what's happening at the federal level, resources may dry up a bit, a lot bit. It may be something that we want to think about. And then the community development for an improved and equitable quality of life. So we were really advocating for transportation improvements, really in alignment with our Vision Zero goals. So one of the things that did pass, that we asked for, passed legislation that would better enable jurisdictions to meet their Vision Zero goals. And one of them was the stop sign. So that got through. The liquor, I'm sorry? The traffic studies did not.
Can we clarify on the stop sign?
Sure.
It's a pilot.
It's a pilot.
So does that mean we would need to reapplicate at some point in the future based on the pilot for them to actually adopt Or do we get it in perpetuity because we're a pilot?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we'll need to follow up with staff and the chief about. I think the bigger thing was that we were really pushing for it to not be limited to, I believe this may be limited to school zones or however it's defined. And we were pushing for them to be in more locations. So I think what will likely happen is, depending on where the dust settles in terms of how this pilot has to be scoped, we may ultimately, based on the results of the pilot, want to really push for broader applicability. Councilmember Lamon?
Maybe they're on a different part of the list, but this has some transportation improvements. So there were some other things that we also had for transportation improvements, and that included enabling us to lower our speed limits without doing
the traffic study. Yep.
Is that what
that was our shorthand for traffic studies, and I knew I was going to have to explain it.
And that came close but did not get enacted, is that correct? So that would be back on our list potentially. It's not on this list, okay. Now I know what you mean by traffic study.
Yep. And I think the big thing that is important for us all to keep in mind is how to compartmentalize where the advocacy needs to be. MML, or the legislative action requests, we really need to think about broader applicability to other municipalities. Sometimes, and this may actually be a good question for folks to bring up during the MML meeting tomorrow, the chapter meeting tomorrow, like, hey, have there been any thoughts around what LARs are you all proposing? Because sometimes it is helpful to hear what other jurisdictions may be advocating for. I think one of the things that we talked about last year was, how can we try to push SHA to, and I think there was a bill trying to push SHA to pay for their own sidewalks. And I'm at the point now with Pepco, pay for your own lights. Right? So there are things like that that kind of did come up over the course of talking about the legislative action request that might make sense because other municipalities share in that issue, or enough municipalities share in that issue. And then you have other items that are unique to us and that we can push through our legislative actions that we do independently. And so the other thing that we had was the liquors, the dealing with the liquor stores. And so to try to make that a more data-driven approach. So that did not move forward, but I don't see it as an MML issue, but I think we may want to just follow up again with Delegate Moon and Delegate Charkoudian about how that needs to shake out. One other area that is still big is housing. And so while there were some things that did pass in terms of housing and Governor Moore's efforts, and they're in the place of implementation, I think that there were some MML related housing bills that did not pass, and we did not get good cause. And I think one question for us may be, do we want to try to push good cause through MML, or do we want to, it hasn't gone well, we've done it multiple times, it hasn't gone well, or it's something that we're just going to push on our own? Councilmember Lamon?
I believe we have something of an issue with our own D20 delegation there not being 100% on the same page, and I don't think that we have successfully persuaded our own leader on this in the Senate that he wants to take in the same direction our House delegate does. So maybe that's something where we, MML aside, where if it's significant to our council, we need to have a more detailed discussion with our own delegation.
Yeah, we've been doing that for years. But I hear you.
It's an impasse that continues to irritate.
Yep.
Within the delegation.
Yep.
So here are the LARs that we submitted last year. The first was the council urges MML to continue efforts to protect the highway user revenues for municipalities and to initiate support for legislation to provide additional revenue authority for municipalities.
Submitted in 2024 for the 2025 session. we just
Correct.
went through.
Correct. And the next item was council urges MML to initiate or support legislation to require SHA to pay for sidewalk infrastructure along state highways. Yeah, there was a bill. MML should consider bills related to utility relocation along state roads. MML should also support SHA implementing safety standards for safer and walkable communities, including expanding automatic enforcement tools, i.e. stop sign cameras. So we got some momentum there. And then the last item was the council urges MML to support legislation to increase mental health and substance use services to youth. Efforts may include increasing behavioral health service capacity within schools, as well as funding for wraparound youth programming, including recreation services and infrastructure. So I'm pulling a couple of items from our LARs from 2023, some things from our D20 presentation, but really this is not finessed at all, but it's a goal for me to try to get a feel for generally the topics that we want to make sure that we want to include. I'm assuming, and maybe this is a question of, do we want to waste an LAR on it? I think everyone is in agreement that we have to that MML should keep pushing for additional revenue sources for municipalities. I don't think they're going to stop that. The question is whether or not we have some novel approach and whether or not we want to use one of our LAR submissions to reinforce that this is really important to us. So I just threw up what was submitted in 2023, which is a little different from what was submitted in 2024, but it was really general, just increasing authority for municipalities to collect revenue. And at that time, I think we had threw in alcohol and tobacco, because at that time in 2023 was when the cannabis bill passed that would allow for municipalities to be able to collect sales tax from the cannabis sales, but you would have to have a dispensary or something in your community. And so we were thinking, well, maybe just do all the sin taxes, like let the local communities that have to deal with the impacts. Maybe we just say, hey, give us a cut of alcohol. The county gets their cut. Give us a cut of alcohol sales. Give us a cut of tobacco sales. But the question for tonight is whether or not revenue, depending on how we finagle the discussion, is a revenue item something we think is worth a LAR submission. And then the other is housing. And again, this kind of goes back to, do we just do Good Cause on our own? Is there something that is from housing that there was a couple of things, and you'll have in your package, like the MML summary that Ann sent in, but is housing something that we want to use one of our LARs for? And if so, what do we want to push? Is it from a good cause approach? Is it from a perspective of really trying to just push more housing, or is there something land use that we want to think about in terms of housing? And then we've already talked about the environment and how we should think about something for the environment. Do we want to really push for building electric charging infrastructure throughout the state? Like, is that where we want to be? Or are there other things that we think take precedent? And those are just the three that I've put together based on kind of where we were leaning with the latest, with our priorities and where we've kind of pushed things before, and based on some things that didn't pass that we would have liked to see. That said, I'm open to suggestions on other areas that that we may want to consider in terms of topic, or even specifically within these areas. Yes, thumbs up, but this is what I'm thinking we should maybe focus on. And I did not. Okay, I think Councilmember DeBala was first.
So, thank you for putting this together. You don't have anything about streets, safe streets and traffic studies and speed limits. I'm assuming that that's a county delegation bill again. And so it doesn't need to be on this list because it's the county delegation, not the state MML that we need to approach with that.
Right.
And I am not, that would be the other topic to consider, but I'm not thinking of the broad topic to consider, but I'm not thinking of any other legislation that we should be pushing statewide in that area.
That is, unless we want to try to push again SHA. And I need to check the requirements again.
Just thinking the same thing.
Whether or not we can resubmit, we would need to revise, but the focus wouldn't be on like the last piece around the automatic enforcement tools, but do we want to keep pushing again for SHA maintenance of their right of way in their streets? Councilmember Lamon.
I'd like to suggest a topic that is new, that falls either in revenue, I think it probably falls in the revenue realm, and that has to do with PEPCO and its responsibilities. Oh, we have a long list, but I think we're likely to encounter resistance to getting reimbursement from PEPCO from this serious damages that were done to the city community center, but also to the schools nearby and to all the residents along the one wire that went awry this time, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think I would like to explore with MML the degree of liability waiver that PEPCO demands of its customers. Not all states are quite so blanket, and I think we should look at proposing that it can be a no-fault measure, perhaps, but I mean, if one can demonstrate that that a problem arises with PEPCO's power delivery that is, doesn't require gross negligence in order for them to have to reimburse for repairs, but is a no-fault system when it turns out to be something that was, still in their wheelhouse. In the absence of gross negligence, we could still get reimbursed, and residents or homeowners or whatever who have the same kind of problem. I think that's worth exploring, and I would like to add the PEPCO duties to the PEPCO duties bill, that they required by law to promptly remove portions of remaining telephone poles or whatever electric poles when they replace them, as opposed to leaving them dangling or occupying a sidewalk space, and that they have somehow or other up their responsibility for relocating poles that make it impossible to achieve ADA compliance, as opposed to waiving at their own whim when they want to, because I think they're being very bad neighbors right now, and I think it's time to put together a package of measures that would hold them accountable. They are a public utility, and I anticipate we're going to need a change in the existing gross negligence standard.
And I was also, and I think it may be warranted for me to follow up with Director Braithwaite, because I was also thinking about PEPCO from the perspective of utility costs. Who bears the cost of utility poles that are on SHA right away? And we are starting to see instances, and it wasn't just limited to us, but other municipalities as well, where, the question is, does the city foot the bill for a pole that rightfully should be on SHA property that they should pay for? And so it kind of dovetails a little bit with SHA utilities, but I could see
how that could all fit together under a possible item related to utilities.
To that,
I
to
think
that point,
Councilmember Wesselek was next.
to that point though, just pointing out that both of those, that's counts, Delegate, Charcute's area, so somebody,
we'll follow up with her.
yeah, we follow up with her and see what she's thinking, particularly about Pepco, because I bet she is.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilmember Wesselek?
Mine is, I guess I have a legislative priority, and I'm wondering where it would fit in, because I don't think it fits in with these LARs, but advocating for changing the qualifications for the property tax credit, like what the county just did. Just wondering, if that's something we want on our list of things that we want to have in mind. And I'm just not quite sure where that fits in. So I'm just kind of putting that on the table, really.
Yeah, I know Cindy has a lot to say about that one. Do you want to just give the history of that?
No, but I will just offer that we're back to Delegate Charcuterie.
We're back to,
And
yeah,
what we didn't try the last time was asking them.
we did not. And, honestly, given what's happening in the world, they may be open to it.
Yeah.
So I'll give a quick synopsis. So Delegate Charcuterie did try to change some of the criteria for eligibility for the tax credit, and basically the fiscal note came back really high. So it was a bit of a no-go. Council Member Schlegel.
Yeah, I think I'm understanding that the strategy here is to try to think in terms of what would Oakland, Maryland also be interested in, and what would Hagerstown and Westminster and places like that. So, but I would echo that, yeah, I think housing costs are going up a lot. We have aging populations all over the state. So I would be interested in seeing if MML could consider taking that under their wing of the changes in the eligibility requirements. I know that our home prices are so sky high that a higher threshold still only makes a marginal difference here. But there was that, and then another one. Oh, I wanted to piggyback on the Pepco. It is irksome that Pepco still sets an 80% cap on the amount of solar generation that you can put on your building. And I think we have a lot of energy around people trying to install solar. And Pepco says, well, let's look at your last year's data. As you know, your last year's data, whatever kilowatt hours you use, you get 80% of that. That's your maximum capacity you can put on the roof. And so it's just locking in an insufficient capacity. They're nowhere near having so much solar in the system that it could blow out the system on a sunny day. So it's a false cap. And so maybe there's a whole package of things that could go there. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say was a whole package of things related to Pepco, like a revisit of Pepco controls. And then just overall, just to remember, like, we have people like climate activist in Uganda, Vanessa Nakate, that in my course we read her book. She's begging and pleading with like communities like us in the U.S. to just do anything we can on climate, because they're having major flooding and combination of droughts and really suffering, and it's happening now. And so, like, as we're looking at this, like, I would say I don't see the chances strong for additional revenue getting approved in the next year with things going to be so tight for the state. I'd rather trade that out for something environmental.
So it sounds like, and we can run these thoughts by Ann and others, but it sounds like we know MML will likely try to fight for money. So maybe we shouldn't use it for that. But if we could figure out something utility related, there might be some interest in that. Definitely something in terms of the environment and then housing, climate in particular, but the housing angle being one of some sort of tax relief.
May I suggest that, last time when we brought this up with Delegate Charkoudian, she basically said, doesn't matter how much we want it, it has zero chance.
Zero chance,
So
yeah.
before we use one of our three chits on that, I would like to get a read from Anne, as well as from Delegate Charkoudian to see whether it would be, basically a waste of our, chit.
I wonder if, regarding housing, if we could push for some kind of state revolving fund or something for rental improvements to rental housing, which could be energy efficiency, and so that would kind of help two birds with one bird feeder. I don't want to kill two birds here.
Feed two birds with one berry.
Yeah, so like if it was something that could accelerate modifications that would improve quality of rental housing, but also be good for the environment.
Yeah.
Maybe places around the state would be interested in that. I don't know.
So we already cover the low income.
I just need to call Laura. Yeah. So it's
So I was just saying, to repeat, that we're back to Delegate Charkoudian, because she sponsored legislation specifically for low income rental to do just that.
Oh.
So, and with her, but that was targeted at a particular subset of housing, the folks who most needed the help. So yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of next steps, so I know that we have this on the agenda for a draft resolution for a vote, but now that we have the meeting on the 28th, which still gives us time to make sure that we have our forms in before the end of the week, I would like for us to just have another work session discussion about this next week, so that we can be have a little bit of drafty kind of language that folks can react to, so that we can kind of finalize things, and then we'll have the vote on the 28th. So we'll make sure that gets tweaked. Councilmember Westlake?
I just want to add to that, looking at the last year's submissions, particularly the third one, I'd like us to think about, maybe discuss next time about the increased mental health and substance services for youth, recreation. Like, I want to, if we could make sure we think through if we want to re-up any of that or repackage that aspect, because I think that's important.
We put that forward, but remember when that was happening, that was Blueprint all day.
Oh.
Yep. So that was when the governor was really pushing Blueprint. Yep. And there definitely were some issues with mental health needs in the various schools, and we were kind of hoping that as part of the larger goal for education that the governor was pushing, that this could be something that could ultimately fly. At least that was the thought at the time.
One more thought, if I may. Listening carefully to what the police chief was saying earlier about not just mental health services, but jobs and programs for youth employment. And given our governor's interest in that through the Maryland program for employment after high school graduation, the Maryland Service Corps, whatever. Have we ever attempted legislation for a youth employment program for Maryland or for municipalities in Maryland that could potentially be a way to contribute to mental health as well as education and crime reduction, et cetera? Is that an appropriate thing for our city to put forward, and would it, address the problem that he was talking about?
I think that's a question that we would need to talk to staff about. I think one of the challenges with going to the state is it's either you should apply for a grant that we already have if you want to start a program, or you need to have, it needs to be like a one-time fund. Like if you're expecting for them to provide you with funding to sustain a program, that's out. But let's say you have a program that you've started and you want to do something special for this program. Maybe we have a workforce program and we are looking for the state to provide $200,000 so that we can secure a rental facility for the next 5 years for this program to be housed. That's something you can sell as more or less like a one-time cost versus asking for money that would ultimately be something that you could sustain, that would be like sustainable funding. Now, if you want to advocate for, you see there's a gap and there's a need for a grant fund. So like one thing that we've done before was say, hey, you know, there's so many businesses that are negatively impacted by the Purple Line. Worked with Janelle Wilkins to say, we need some grant funds to go to these businesses. Now, it's not going to be limited to you as a community, but we pushed really hard to make sure that the state worked with the Purple Line to make grant funding available to everyone that's impacted.
Well, for example, to take the Purple Line idea further, all of these new businesses are going to be facing the complexities of redesigning how their stores are, and there's going to be a need for sort of a BID type of crew out there cleaning up and washing windows and making the community, the Purple Line impacted community, a workable and a user-friendly one. Again, we could potentially consider a pilot that links the summer jobs program to Purple Line opening and implementation, and try and find, you know, a way to hire people who live right near there and are impacted by it negatively economically or something like that, in taking into consideration your point that you can't get them to fund a long time project, but perhaps there's a way to link it to a form of restitution for all of the inconvenience and the costs associated.
But again, that would still be establishing a new program in the city. So even if, and I'm not saying that we can't, I'm just saying that we would have to establish the program. So let's say, for example, we have the community quality of life grants. One of the things that was in that grant was
Could we do it through, pardon me, but when you're saying the city would have to do it, I was thinking that it was something that we could advocate for, but it would be administered through the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Association or something, but it would be funding for youth employment.
But that would,
kind of thing.
but then that would require us to have a conversation with them to see whether or not they would have the capacity to establish a program that would then have to be advocated for. And you shouldn't, it's good practice to not let the only funding you get for a program that you want to sustain to be one-time state money. So that means they're going to have to constantly make sure that they either have money in their budget or money as part of their broader fundraising efforts to sustain the program. And now there are grant programs that are out there that do aspects of this, right? So I don't want to DHCD, you know, have lots of grants that might fit the bill for a program such as this. I just want us to think about, if we're advocating for a grant to be established, then it's a grant that would be established for the state, right? And it would be anybody that could be eligible within whatever parameters that we're able to get pushed would be eligible for. So like with the Purple Line grants, there's lots of businesses. There was a few businesses at Tacoma Park, but there was a lot in Silver Spring, and there were some in other places, because it wouldn't necessarily just be limited to us. So if we are going down the path of pushing for state grant to be established, one, we need to make sure that there isn't a grant that already exists that basically serves that purpose. And two, recognize that it wouldn't necessarily be a grant that would be earmarked for a particular entity. It would likely be broader in scope, but that's, you know, it just depends on if that's something we want to try to push. And we don't necessarily have to push it through the LAR, right? It doesn't have to be pushed through the LAR. It could be something that's pushed through a county bill or something that we work with our D20 delegation, to try to see if they would be willing to maybe push something through that might get us some additional resources. Councilmember Schlegel.
So related to that, and perhaps more broadly thinking about redevelopment possibilities, where does the state stand right now in terms of empowerment zones? Is there funding for those? Is there legislation? It's funded, I know, often as tax credits, so it's like a negative funding.
The opportunity zones. So it's a federal thing.
That's a federal thing, so
Right.
the state doesn't do anything like that, probably.
I mean, there at one point there was some momentum where the state was, as part of their criteria for different types of development grants, if you were in an opportunity zone, you might have received a priority in terms of, you might have rated a little higher in terms of your grant requests. I'm not exactly sure if that's still the case now, because I'm not sure where that program lies. I think the only thing in terms of development that will be something close to follow is what's going to happen at the federal level in terms of CDBG funds, community development block grant funds, and other types of federal funds that would ultimately be granted to the state that the state could then use to give grants to do things like facade improvements and other types of investments. So I'm not exactly sure how all of that's going to shake out.
I'm thinking about this. This might be something that takes more thought, but I'm trying to think. This might appeal to lots of municipalities. We have the Main Street program that is restricted to sort of maybe areas that were like pre-1950, and we don't have really a program for like the early suburban arterial streets that have now aged out, and they're like often 70 plus years old, and whether there might be some state interest in or MML interest in a program that would be akin to Main Streets, but it would be for larger early suburban corridors, that kind of thing, or for those areas in rural towns that had seen strip development that's now starting to age out.
Well, I mean, I think that's something I would have to verify with HCD, because, like, for example, Long Branch, Discover Long Branch has submitted an application to be Main Street. That was something that they mentioned during their presentation to us. So I would say that it's not, I don't necessarily believe exactly that to be a Main Street, you have to be quaint for the Long Branch area.
Okay. Yeah, that was. Could we register that as a
Yeah.
question then?
The standards for the standard for Main Street are usually slum and blight. It's not necessarily limited to 19th century building stock. Yeah, we could look into that some more.
I've got myself all excited about this whole idea of youth employment, and I wonder whether it sounded like you have a plan to see Delegate Charkoudian this weekend. Did I overhear that correctly? Or
I might see
or you might
Saturday
see her-
at the first one.
That one possibility is the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, which consists of affected communities and businesses all along the Purple Line Corridor. So it has some statewide, it's multiple county-wide appeal. Let's just say we're going to talk about Montgomery County and Prince George's County, and that's an existing infrastructure that has staff and contacts all along the Purple Line that could potentially be a way to introduce the idea of a job development program in support of all the businesses that have suffered. And so I don't know. I think I'd like to see what her reaction would be.
Yeah, and I also think it might make sense to take a look at what programs already exist, because there's the Summer Rise program that's within the county. I think that there may be other workforce development programs that exist. And so the question I think the chief was raising was, to what extent do we have these types of youth programs are we pushing them within the city? And does it necessarily have to be the case that it is the city initiating it, or is it that we are perhaps tapping into other programs that may already exist that might enable us to have a mechanism for our kids? And keep in mind, I keep stressing this point, but with our budget passing, we highlighted as part of the community life grants that workforce development was a priority, and we put additional monies into that grant program. So it may be the case that we actually get some applications around youth work and youth employment through that grant program. So I think it just might, for the purpose of this exercise, I appreciate the excitement, but I think for the purpose of this exercise, that may not be something that's quite ripe for an LAR. It may be something we're talking to D20 delegation around some innovative ways, taking a look at what's happening in the county and some other programs that may exist, and then following up with our HCD staff also around what we may ultimately get out of the applications that come in for the community life grants to see whether or not they serve as a really good pilot for something we may want to do in greater expansion. And with that,
Just to be followed up, I'm not sure if it's too late for Summarize, if the Purple Line Coalition or if one or more of the business associations along the Purple Line corridor want to have those folks over the summer. It might
yes,
be too late.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
can
sure.
look into it. But then they would have to have the capacity to manage them.
Right. And so, City Manager DeSpirito.
Just one additional thought. Is there any thought, I think there was some reference to it in prior weeks, but possibility of at least exploring whether there, at the statewide level, there could be some improvements to the MPAA?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Improvements to the state's, the Maryland Police Accountability Act. Whether that's worth exploring.
For an LAR?
I just throw that out. Whether that's something you want to, I don't know how feasible that is, but I know that there was some reference by council in recent meetings with respect to, we've expressed some of the difficulty that cities have had just in terms of, some personnel actions, as it morphed from LIBOR to the current MPAA process, and a lot of the regulations, a lot of the specifics hadn't been completely developed by the time that the legislation passed. And, maybe some sort of review, has it performed in the manner, with the spirit in which it was originally intended, something like that. Just as an idea.
That would be for purposes of legislation or for purposes of, like, for example, judicial proceedings, hearing or two, to examine it with an eye to.
I'm sorry.
I wasn't clear on whether that was a proposal for legislation or a proposal for, say, a hearing and evaluation by, like, our delegation, like judicial proceedings in the Senate or something like that.
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think that could be thought about a little bit more.
All right, so we will be having another work session on this next week. And so I don't know, in terms of kind of piecing things together based on this discussion, are there any volunteers that want to work on pulling some language together? Okay, Councilmember DeBala, Councilmember Landman. All right.
Legislative experts.
They're like, come on, let's bring the gang back together again.
That's the first time. Kind of hurting our feelings over here.
I'm just in a really tough part of the school year.
No, it's perfectly fine.
I'm hibernating until next General Assembly session.
No, it's
I'll be
perfectly
back
fine.
in for that.
Well, I will definitely be in the mix with the two of you so that we can get this thing done. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, with that, that is all I have for tonight. So thank you all so much for talking through the LARs, and definitely looking forward to continuing this conversation next week. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.